Microphone is on. I have a steady red light. Give me a sound check, fellas.
3, 2, 1, go.
3, 2, 1, stop.
Okay, helps if I turn off the right button. There we go. Let me turn my logo back on. There we go. Okay, well, hello, Glue Troopers. Welcome to another scintillating episode of Max's Models, and going live at 7 o'clock at 6:59. Let me just go ahead and turn that off. It's
Max has a new toy.
As you guys may notice, I have a new little backdrop here. I found out that buried down in the filters of this live stream program, there is actually a chroma key function. So I threw up my green screen, and now we have a nice big Max's Models logo behind me while we talk about things. So,
Is that a reminder?
yeah. So in case I forget what live stream I'm doing. So we've been talking this week about a couple of things. Ken, are you watching the comment section?
I am.
Okay. We were talking this week about a couple of things, including the new M10 Booker, the new light tank that the Army has come out with, that it just seems determined not to call a light tank, even though it seems to serve every description of a light tank. And I don't know why they gave it M10. I'm inclined to think perhaps because of the old M10 tank destroyer. Maybe not, maybe a total coincidence, but either way, the M10 Booker is the selected vehicle. And that got me to thinking about light tanks in general, and they're kind of overlooked. So, how is it I can talk for 15 minutes, and as soon as we turn on the microphone, I have to cough? So I've decided to start working on the Academy. The danger of green screen, unfortunately, is that the Academy M3 Honey Stewart light tank. I had to go put this. Oh my gosh, even the shirt's doing it too.
See what Diane Smith said?
What's that?
Can you move your head a little, Max? The chat is blocking half your lovely face.
Oh, hold on. I have the cure for that. But be careful what you wish for. Da, da, da. And all I gotta do is...
The green screen is not doing the background too well on that tank.
There we go.
Yeah, kind of like faded out, sort of.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they did not do the greatest job. I look like a World War II tanker from the German army. But, yeah, this is a free haircut because the girl clearly had some issues with it, and even the expert barber couldn't fix it, so they're like, yeah, we're sorry, the haircut's free. I'm like, you think? Anyway.
Sluggo, you're on the wrong website.
I don't even want to know what that's in reference to.
Talk to a blonde. It just... You can talk to a blonde, Sluggo. It just won't be a girl.
And so, anywho, but it got me thinking about light tanks, and it's funny, when tanks first came out, they had no definition because nobody even knew what they were. There's arguments to say even the word tank was some kind of code word, something to throw off what they were doing. And some people called them land ships. And, of course, we're all familiar with the World War I male and female series tanks. And when you think of World War I, that's normally what you think of as a tank, which, again, like back in the First World War, there was no real... everything was new. Nothing really had a name. So land ships, they had a whole bunch of names for them. And by the way, one of the Glue Troopers just reminded me that I think this is like the anniversary of the first battle of the Somme, which is the first time tanks were used with moderate success. They really didn't know how to use them. The infantry got behind them. They wound up getting knocked out by artillery. But so it's kind of apropos that we'd be talking about these today. But although the tanks didn't enter the battle till later. But
Max, Ricky says you won the bet. Now get it sorted. What the heck does that mean?
So not. I think it was about getting a better background, but anyway. So anyway, but when you say tank, what?
Did they have separate motor pools for the male and female tanks?
No. And you know what happened, Ken? Was the male tanks.
It made little tanks.
And they made little tanks. And so anyway, but the little Renault FT was really the tank that everybody thinks of when they think of the first, what we think of today as a tank. Fully tracked, fully armored cannon, and 360-degree rotating turret. Well, the amazing part was the design was so basically sound. A lot of people don't know this, but Renault FTs were not only sold all over the world and copied by other countries, some built under license, but quite a few of them, and I mean no small number, actually served in the Second World War. And in fact, they even fought the Americans in, I believe it was Morocco, when they went up against a bunch of American M3 Stuarts. And eventually the American Stuarts got the upper hand on them, but at first, both the tanks had such small guns that were like throwing tennis balls at each other. But
Darkwood 777 says, how many genders of tanks does the Army have these days?
Well, I wouldn't want to take Booker on it. So.
Well, Garfield says, no, Ken, that is why there were so many tankettes.
Leave it to the Italians.
Is that where those little Italian tanks came from?
Well, a little pasta, a little vino.
Well, those are the cans they put the olive oil in.
Oh, God. Okay, so anyway, but after the First World War, the concept of the light tank was actually very popular. Almost all of everybody's interwar tanks were like what today we would call, looking back at them, light tanks. And here's a piece of trivia I only learned because I was watching a video with the Chieftain. Actually, he started off talking about the M10 Booker and got into this. Now, here's something despite all my military history, if I knew this, I had forgotten it. Did you know that before World War II, the Army did not have such a thing as boot camp or basic training?
Really?
They just, here's a gun, go at it?
No. The way it worked was, before about 38, 39, the mid-30s, if you joined the Army, you went branch specific. If you went in the cavalry, you went and trained as a cavalryman. If you went in the infantry, you went and trained as an infantryman. If you went into... and don't forget, the cavalry there was no armor branch back then. Most of these tanks belonged to the cavalry. Now, that created some real issues. And knowing what I know about how militaries operate and how the government operates, what I'm about to say is not as ludicrous as it's going to seem. But the cavalry branch had most of the little M1, M2s, and M3s. And infantry wanted some armored support. And they didn't like to have to go running off and begging the armor units, hey, can you send us some tanks? Because sometimes they did something that because a lot of times you didn't have the combined forces like you have now. It was kind of a new concept, which the Germans mastered with Blitzkrieg. But what happened was, in order for the infantry to get some tanks, they had to come up with other names for them. And by the way, this is not a trick that was unique to that period. You're going to see this happen again 30 years later. We'll get to that in a little bit with the Sheridan. But basically they had to say, we need an armored infantry support vehicle. All right? Well, that's not a tank. Or we need an armored reconnaissance vehicle. That's not a tank. Well, okay, then you can have this little, and we'll go off and design these little light tanks, and that'll be our armored reconnaissance vehicle, our infantry support vehicle. They were playing all these word salad games so that they could get their own bloody tanks. And it was not long before World War II, and I think it was General Leslie McNair, who's kind of a controversial guy, but he's the one Fort McNair up near D.C. is named after. But Leslie McNair said, look, we need a universal soldier concept. We need every soldier to be trained to a certain minimum standard. Because infantry guys and armor guys and all the guys in different branches had no clue how each other operated. And they held some war games. I want to say it was 39 or 40. And they were a catastrophe. I think a bunch of guys actually got killed in the war games. And nobody was even shooting live ammo. Accidents and things like that. And it was just a disaster. And they realized this isn't going to fly. The pilots didn't know how to dogfight. There were just all kinds of issues. And so they said the first thing, everybody needs to be a basic soldier first. They came up with the concept of basic training. Everyone will go through this training. They'll learn to march and to shoot and to do all the soldier stuff and to bivouac and patrol and everything. And when they're done with that, then they'll go off to tank school or advanced infantry school or whatever the school may be, or cavalry school. Because you got to remember, if you enlisted in those days, if you enlisted in the cavalry, you were in the cavalry. There was no moving over to another branch, or at least it was rare. And some of this had been fleshed out in the real during the First World War, but you have to remember, after the First World War, budgets were just slashed. In fact, and guys, I don't mean to sound like, I don't want to sound glib. What I'm about to show you is not a very comfortable thing to see. But we were talking about this being the anniversary of the Battle of the Somme. I just stumbled onto this earlier today. The Battle of the Somme, now mind you, this was a 3-month-long battle. But there were 1 million casualties with over 300,000 killed on both sides. Now that, for comparison, is about 3 times as many that were killed in both the atomic bombs, which is a staggering thing to think about. This was done with rifles and artillery and machine guns. And the lessons that were hard learned at the Battle of the Somme weren't forgotten entirely, but the lessons, they learned a lot from it. The second Battle of the Somme, the Americans were there, but the casualty rate was much lower, partly because of advances in military strategizing. But these things we learned came at a high price. And one of the things that the infantry learned was, we really do need armor support. And one of the things armor had learned is we really do need infantry support. But no one gave the infantry tanks and no one gave the armor guys infantry. And finally they realized this crap's got to stop. So the cure to the problem was to develop armor branch and they also had tank destroyer branch, which is what Leslie McNair commanded, and that was very controversial if there ever should have been a tank destroyer branch. But the cavalry didn't want to give up tanks, so they said, well, we need armor reconnaissance vehicles. Again, word salad so everybody could get their equipment. And unfortunately for us, the Germans and the Japanese did not have these problems. And the Germans, their little Mark III Panzer was a really good little tank. And then their Mark IV came out. Fortunately, thanks to the British, we were able to design the Sherman. But tanks like the M3, this was the world's idea of a tank when the war broke out. And don't get me wrong, the M3 is a great little tank. In fact, they updated it to the M5 later on, gave some improvements. It was a great little tank, but that's just what it was, a little tank. That door knocker 37 millimeter gun it had, you could take out a half track or a truck or a very light armored vehicle, maybe even another light tank, but it was going to bounce off even a Panzer III. You might knock out a Panzer II with it. The tank was fast, it was reliable. The British loved it, the Americans loved it. But it was a great little reconnaissance vehicle, because the idea of reconnaissance is let's scoot out there, and when the first guy opens up on us with the machine guns, we'll pop around at him and run away. If unfortunately the first thing you ran into was a German tank, you were in a world of hurt, so you better hope your speed can help you get away. And those little buggers were fast. That's one. I've actually been in one, and when I was a kid, and even when I was a kid, they were amazingly tight inside. And we're going to be talking about the Stuart kit. Unfortunately for us, the Germans had their very excellent Mark IV. Mark III and then Mark IV. And somebody asked me recently, how many different tanks did the Germans make with the Mark IV? And I can tell you this much, that's why Monogram made so many of these vehicles, was because they could use just like the real German army did, they could use their existing chassis and just, hey, we can make we can make the Wirbelwind and the Ostwind and all these other vehicles and the Stug, and all we got to do is cut the upper components. And I probably missed a few here, but these are just the ones I could get today. But every one of these, yeah.
A lot of people are saying that cavalry had combat cars.
That's what it was. Thank you. Combat cars. That's what they called them. And again, they were freaking tanks, okay? They called them combat cars to get it past Congress. It was one of the few times that the average congressman's lack of knowledge on anything military actually turned out to be an advantage. And I might add that even the little Stuart chassis, or combat car chassis, was used for a variety of vehicles, although very small ones. But when you have a versatile chassis system like we had on the M3 Grant and Lee, or the Germans had on the Panzer III and Panzer IV, you're like, look, no reason to reinvent the wheel, or in this case, wheels. Let's just go ahead and slap everything we want on top. And don't forget, some of these things had some ridiculously large guns on them. You had at least 3 self-propelled guns, although that Hirschreck in the middle, I think they only made a handful of. They only made about 2 of those, but they did see combat. And then they started slapping Sherman armor, that plate armor on the side, once they started going up against bigger tanks. And I like to think the Sherman takes credit for that, but they used them as assault guns. Yeah, go ahead.
Before the first tank, were there any tracked vehicles up to that point?
Yeah, there were like ones like Little Willie, and they played with some interim tank vehicles, and they did have armored cars, usually armed with machine guns. In fact, Rolls-Royce made some of them. There were a litany of armored vehicles. In fact, since we're on that point, I'll cover one point real quick. A lot of people go, why don't these things just have big wheels and tires instead of tracks? And they tried that with armored cars, but armored cars had to stick to the road because you know how thin the tires were in the 20s and 30s and the teens and the aughts. Also, the suspension systems. And what they learned was through a lot of testing and a lot of experimentation. And they started off, actually, Ken, they started off with tractors, with farm tractors, just modifying them. Don't even get me started on the Bob Simple tank, but which was basically, I think it was in Australia. They were like, we need to make an indigenous tank. All they had were some tractors. They basically armor plated a tractor with absolute disaster in every way. But fortunately, they never saw any combat. But they realized that, look, if you go out on tires and wheels, you're going to bog. These things are going to be heavy by nature. What's the way we can get the most square footprint? And the tracked vehicles, the idea of tracks had actually sort of been used before. There were people that had learned to put large pieces of wood on wagon wheels to work like snowshoes, and some people had played with some primitive track ideas. So the concept was known, but it wasn't until the First World War that they really started experimenting, put some money behind it, and said, okay, because they knew from some of the farm tractors and the early bulldozers that hey, you can get across a muddy field when you have tracks because you're basically bringing solid ground with you. That's what the track does. And it gives you all this square footage under the bottom. Because remember, when the track is on the ground, it's stationary. It's only moving when it comes up past the last road wheel. And they had learned that this was a way to get what they, just like a boat, flotation. But they also learned that there was a ratio of width of the track, width between the tracks, and length of the track, that if you violated that ratio, you started slinging tracks, or the vehicle became very unstable. So that's why most tanks have a pretty comparable ratio. And in fact, if there's any major criticism of the Sherman tank, it's that the tracks were a little too thin, a little too narrow. But when the Germans hit on the Mark III, they really had a winning combination. Of course, they just expanded it to the Mark IV, which you see here. The way to tell a Mark III and a Mark IV at a glance is Mark IV has 8 road wheels, 8 road wheels, and the Mark III had 6. It's just the same thing, shorter. But they were easy to make, they were easy to maintain, heck of a lot easier than a Panther or a Tiger. You know, nothing there's interleaved. When one of those wheels breaks, you just pull it off and stick on another one. You don't have to pull off 5, 6 wheels just to get to one inner wheel. Although Panthers and Tigers had excellent road handling because of that. But everything comes at a cost. So, and we did the same thing with our vertical volute suspension system. If you ever look at the Priest and the Lee and the Sherman and the M10 tank destroyer, they all basically have the same vertical volute system that you see on the Sherman. It's why reinvent the wheel, and that makes it easier for kit model companies because hey, we can make all these different vehicles, and all we got to make is a different upper for each one. We can use the same, which is why, of course, when most model kits, just like this one that I have right here, normally speaking, okay, let me turn my camera back on. You have, one or two runner trees that have nothing but wheels on them. That way they can reuse this over and over again for a bunch of different kits. And we're going to get into these in a little bit and some cool stuff that Academy did. This is the Academy M3. But after World War, now, you probably all are familiar with the M1 Abrams tank. A lot of people even know who it's named after, General Crichton Abrams. And he was a young tanker lieutenant in the Second World War. And he saw all the problems we ran into with our excellent, but unfortunately not terribly thickly armored Sherman tank. And he swore to God, if he was ever in a position, to be involved in Army procurement, the Americans were never again going to have a tank that would get cracked open like an egg. Again, I reiterate, it wasn't that the Sherman was defective. The Germans just had really big, powerful, high-velocity guns that even German tanks couldn't defend themselves against. So, you could crack anything open with that freaking 88 the Tiger had on it, either Tiger. And that Panther, that high-velocity 75 also. What? Were you going to say something?
Well, somebody said that with all due respect, there were a lot more complaints about the Sherman tanks than narrow tracks.
There were.
They were unaffectionately called Ronson burners by the poor tankers that had to command them.
That recently, about 6 or 8 months ago, caused a bit of a to-do in YouTube tanker world. And there were a group of people that were coming out and saying that comment developed after the war because there was no Ronsons apparently didn't exist during the war. And somebody found about this thing about they called them Ronsons because they would light on the first try because you hit them and the ammo would explode and up she went. And a lot of people are saying that they think that that's apocryphal because there were no Ronson ads that said that until after the war. And somebody somewhere found a Ronson lighter ad from like 1942 that said lights on the first try. So apparently that may actually be a legitimate thing. But there are a lot of legends that get spread. Yeah, normally, now, in fairness, the Sherman, one of the reasons that happened was their ready rack of ammo was stacked up in the sides of the tank, and it was in dry storage. And if the tank took a hit in the side, like you saw in the movie Fury when Lieutenant's tank gets hit with that Panzerfaust, it would ignite that ammunition, it would go off, and a lot of times it would fry the crew before they could get out. That being said, the Sherman, if I'm not mistaken, had the highest survival rate of any tank of the war, partly because it had 4 hatches on top and 1 on bottom. And they were spring-loaded, and they were over each person's position, except, I think, the gunner, or the loader. But so it had and they often drove around with the hatches open anyway. But that being said, yeah, the Sherman had a lot of drawbacks. Now when they went to wet storage later in the war, where they put them in that glycol mix, or I think it was a glycol. It was some kind of gelled liquid that they would store the ammo in. When it took a hit, it kept oxygen from getting in there, so the ammo took about, I think somebody said something like 8 seconds for it to ignite. That gave everybody a chance to bail out. And the survival rate went up after wet storage. So that was one of the big complaints, was the dry storage of the ammo in the sides. That's why you see a lot of them with those applique armor on the side. They're trying to help protect where the ammo was stored, which a lot of times just gave the Germans a good aiming point. But the Sherman also, obviously, almost any piece of German artillery could go through it. But again, the Germans had such excellent guns. There were a lot of tanks that they could go through. The two they had trouble knocking out were the Matilda and the Churchill because they were so heavily armored. But there were several. But the 88s could take out anything. A lot of these tank battles was first one to shoot wins, and since the Brits and the Americans and the Canadians were all on the march, they were moving into Germany. They kept rolling into ambushes because the Germans would just, set up an ambush at every road point. Well, sooner or later, some poor schlub's got to go through there and find out where they're at. And that was just the way the war was fought back then. But the...
so who decided who was the first tank? Because you knew that was the one they were going to take out.
Yeah, that's why it's called taking point. It's like that's up to the commanding officer. But light tanks were preferred for that because of their speed. They were harder to hit, provided they weren't coming straight on at you. In fact, there was I had heard some German tankers make comments to the effect of, because the turret on the Tiger didn't move that fast. I don't know about the Mark IV, but they said in some cases the Stuarts and later on the Chaffees would go sailing by so fast they couldn't traverse the gun fast enough to track them if they were close. But then also, but they also like to hit you from behind anyway if they had the choice. But the light tank concept was very popular. But when Crichton Abrams was a general, and what?
You were even the same one I am.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead, Steve. You laugh first.
Well, Shaggy says, they voted Max to be the first one to go.
Yeah. You got point. Did you ever see the movie The Big Red One? He's punishing one of the privates by making him take point.
Yeah, well, if you lost the card game the night before, you were up.
Okay.
Seems put up to a vote. Least popular guy goes first.
Okay, it was France pointed out it was the loader that didn't have the overhead hatch. The gunner did. Yeah, and it was the loader's usually the junior guy on the tank.
Meanwhile, we're getting a lot of comments from people saying, turn off the green screen and go back the way it was.
Turn off the green screen?
Yeah, apparently it's causing problems on some people's computers.
Okay, I can do that. Hang on just a second.
Because they said they'd rather see your wall of shame behind you.
Well, hold on. Hang on. I can fix that. Give me just a second here. Video capture device. Okay. I don't think that's the one I wanted. Let me go with this one. We go.
So I
there
guess
we go.
What, the commander, when he decides who goes first, whoever happens to see first, that's who goes first?
I don't know. But we'll take a break later and I'll take this thing down then. Well, I can still have my logo behind me. Just adjust this a little bit. There we go.
There's the Max we know and love.
Yeah.
You look like you're in a water slide.
Whee! So anyway, the light tank concept stayed popular through the Korean War. And, here, let me show you a picture. We shall go to the visuals. First off, all of these countries operated light tanks. All right? So, and by the way, the four on the right apparently still operate some old M41 Walker Bulldogs. This is just the ones operating Walker Bulldogs. So the light tank concept remained popular, and especially in smaller countries, because tanks are like planes. The bigger they are, the more they cost to operate. And the whole light tank concept was better in the jungle. It was better for countries on a budget. It was better in the mountains. I mean, basically, if you weren't fighting the Germans, if you weren't fighting a first world country, if you weren't fighting the Russians or somebody who had a lot of heavy armor, you really didn't need heavy armor yourself. And unfortunately, the Bulldog, which is a great tank, the way it got used in Vietnam, a lot of that had to do more with logistic support or the lack thereof, but they didn't fare too well. But you got to remember, a light tank, the operative word light, you got speed, but the danger of that is if you outrun your infantry, I mean, just about any tank weapon out there can take you out. That is the exact same problem that the tank destroyers had. They were made to lay in ambush and knock out enemy tanks. In fact, the British didn't even call them tank destroyers. They called them self-propelled guns because the tank destroyer isn't a weapon system. Tank destroyer is a doctrine. And it's essentially lay an ambush and hit them. That's basically a 3-inch Navy gun on that thing. It is an extremely powerful cannon. And it could even take out a Tiger. But they got about 1 inch of armor on that thing because it had to be light, to be fast, and to be mobile. So whether you call it tank destroyer or self-propelled gun, that's basically an ambush weapon. And light tanks, on the other hand, are a completely different animal. They are, fast reconnaissance and infantry support. That's their raison d'etre. It's not the only thing they do, but it's what they do really well. The American Army liked its light tanks and kept coming up with new ones after the war.
Tanks, targets with tracks.
Well, in the wrong environment, that's actually not an unfair criticism of them. I mean, they are bullet magnets. They're shell magnets, artillery magnets, absolutely. And but the whole idea is these guys are not supposed to operate alone. Nobody is. It's called combined arms for a reason. And unfortunately, some people just didn't get the memo. And it's real easy when you're inside a tank to think, I'm fighting infantry, I'm unstoppable. Yeah, until one of those guys comes up with a Panzerfaust or a RPG or something. And but the concept has a lot of value. The Korean War, unfortunately, the Bulldogs found out real quick that they were absolutely no match for the heavy Soviet stuff. And when the enemy has a heavy tank, unless you've got aircraft, air support artillery, you better have a heavy tank of your own.
Yeah, I know what you're reading.
What?
Herman says, I'm pretty sure the Walker Bulldog fought Godzilla too.
Those were Chaffies, the one on the lower left. In the original movie, those were Chaffies and Shermans in Japanese markings, but I think the Walker Bulldogs might have been used in another movie. We're going to talk about that in just a second, because there's something on the Stewart's decal sheet. I almost I didn't have time to put it together. Real quick, guys, I was going to have all this elaborate stuff put up today. We had a bit of a family crisis. I had to leave the house and go help out some family and come back. Well, not a crisis. We had a family member's car broke down, and I had to run out on the interstate and go get them. So when I got back, I didn't have a lot of time to put some. But I was actually going to have a Godzilla versus a Stewart where the logo goes, yeah, clearly this guy didn't see the movie.
Did you stop at Buc-ee's when you went to help them?
Well, it wasn't that far away. Fortunately, they were much closer. By the way, and I was just thinking about this earlier, the tanks in the original Godzilla movie, after they shot at him and drove him off, they backed out of there. You see them backing up and getting away. It was the later movies where they're driving those, Type 10s or something, or M64s, the Japanese. Those were the idiots that decided to turn around and try to shoot it out with him and got themselves melted. He also melted some Shermans in King Kong versus Godzilla. And but the rest of them scooted to that underground bunker. And I was like, man, if I ever have tanks, I want an underground garage like that where I can hide from Godzilla.
Shaggy Bud says the Walker Bulldog is one of Max's favorite movies, Iron Giant.
Yes, very good. I didn't think about that. You're right. But getting back to what about earlier, the Bulldog, because the suspension and the transmission and everything were so robust, that again the Army said, hey, we'll make other vehicles out of this existing powertrain. So the Duster, which a lot of guys, the twin 40mm anti-aircraft gun that actually wound up being much more effective as a anti-bush gun in Vietnam. The Marines had them. They loved them. They were very effective at chopping down the bush and chasing the enemy out. They did a self-propelled gun, and one of our earlier armored personnel carriers was made on that same chassis. And that one, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, that had steel armor on it. But so the Bulldog, the Bulldog was a great little tank. Those are actually, the Bulldog you see on the right is actually, I believe, a South Vietnamese Bulldog. And the problem is that when the enemy did bring up tanks, they didn't bring up light tanks. They brought up big T-54s and 55s, which the Walker Bulldog is a great little light tank. Again, operative word, light tank. And the Army actually kind of doubled down on the light tank with everybody's favorite, the Sheridan. Now, I got a Sheridan story for you. I may have shared it before, but This is the very first armored vehicle. I was probably 12, maybe 13 years old. I remember riding to the local ball field where it was some kind of weekend activity, and the National Guard and the Marine Reserves and all these others were bringing out their. So they brought a couple of helicopters and flew them in from Fort Rucker, just as a recruitment tool, right? And I was so excited. They're letting the kids crawl around, and of course the 50 cal wasn't on it. None of the machine guns were in it, and they of course no ammo. And we were all hopping around in it, and I got in. But what?
What good is that?
I know. That was almost exactly what I said. Where are the rounds, man? And school's right there. One shot, I'll take her out. So
Rhonda said that Walker Bulldog was also used extensively both as German and American tanks in TV series combat.
Yep. And in the movie The Battle of the Bulge, they were using Chaffies, which I think were Spanish Chaffies. Because a lot of European and South American countries used this stuff long after we did. The Kelly's Heroes, those Shermans were Yugoslavian army. They were still active duty. And that's how they were able to get so many Shermans. So one of the reasons these guys are always going to countries like this to film these movies, first off, they look like Europe because they were Europe. But also a lot of them are still using, although a tanker from the period could have said, oh, wait a minute, that's a post-war tank because this, we didn't have that. But still, the average moviegoer and 12-year-old kid who still built enough models and he knew what a Sherman looked like. And the Sherman the Sherman, the Chaffee, the Walker Bulldog. They were the tanks that would not die. They're like the Russian T-54, T-55. They just, when you get something that works, and they kind of prove the adage that sometimes you don't need the biggest, most expensive, heaviest tank if you don't have a first world threat, and you're fighting guerrillas in the jungle or some third-rate army. You don't need that stuff. I mean, there were Mark IV Panzers fighting in Syria against the Israelis.
Craig says the Walker Bulldog was basically the Chrysler K car of tanks.
That's not an unfair assessment. The K car saved Chrysler.
And Herman says if you can find a better tank, buy it.
Hey, the Germans bought it. Just about everybody used the Bulldog, and but the Army being the Army, and this by the way, and you guys know I was in the Army. When I say the Army being the Army, that's not a pejorative, nor is it a compliment. It's just a statement of fact, okay? It's one of those things. Is that an insult or a compliment? Yes. But the Army being the Army, and want to stay on the cutting edge of things, they knew that their hardware was getting old, so they're like, look, we need something new. So they come up with the Sheridan. Now, I have a real love-hate relationship with the Sheridan. Getting back to my story, it's the first armored vehicle I was ever in. And I was so looking forward to jumping in there and throwing the hatch over like they did in all the war movies. So when I jump in and I ask the sergeant, hey, where's the hatch? He goes, it's right there. And I see this handle. I'm like, what is this? And it's this slide around thing. There it is. There's the driver's on the center. And the front of the driver's compartment, it doesn't have a throw-over hatch. It has a 180-degree rotating face. Now, that is a good design because no matter where the barrel is, you can get out. There were tankers that were trapped in tanks because the gun was over their hatch and they couldn't get it out. They couldn't get it open. This addressed that. But as a 12 or 13-year-old who's seen a bunch of World War II movies, I wanted to slam the hatch like, Sergeant Saunders or somebody, or Telly Savalas in the Battle of the Bulge. And I'm like, oh man, I'm spinning this thing around like a lazy Susan, and managed not to get my fingers caught in it. But even I realized at the time that was still pretty cool. And a couple of friends of mine served on Sheridans, or I should say acquaintances, co-workers, served on Sheridans. They went to Vietnam, and unfortunately, they did not perform well. That Shillelagh missile system never worked, so you were basically using a low-velocity 152 millimeter gun, which is still a big gun. But they were really pushing a few too many technologies. But basically, if I'm not mistaken, it had effectively aluminum armor, and it couldn't stop anything.
I've been reading that somebody said aluminum armor is like an oxymoron.
Well, but you've got to remember the idea. This thing was supposed to be light, mobile, and go with the infantry. This, although by the technical definition, it's a tank. It kind of really isn't. And yet it is. And before I sound like I am confused, which, okay, maybe just a little bit, when people call the Sheridan a tank, I'm kind of like, if you look at it sideways. It doesn't have steel armor. So I'm not entirely sure tank applies, but it is still armor. So yeah, kind of, it's one of those things that just kind of makes you go, eh. So, and
Did you have a goat in your shop?
no, that was me.
Okay.
But one of the things they actually tried at one point was to put a I got here somewhere. Oh yeah, here it is. They tried to put a 75 millimeter gun on the thing, a high velocity, just to make it more of a real tank, since the missile system / gun tube they had was having a lot of problems. I never heard one good word about the Shillelagh missile system, not one. Apparently, they never really got it to work right. It was too. But the thing about the Sheridan was, and this is important, it was air droppable. You could do it lapes, or you could do it by parachute. The thing was very lightweight. It was pretty nimble, pretty quick, very fast. It had its virtues, and when used for certain tasks, there were several times in battle that the thing actually did perform rather well when it was used within its strengths and avoided its weaknesses. It's the kind of vehicle that when you see enemy armor, it may be time to make yourself scarce. Now, I don't count ones that were lost to landmines, because landmines can be as big as you want to big them, because you're big as you want to. I mean, landmine took out an M1 Abrams, if I'm not mistaken. That one that got knocked out, I think, was a landmine. So a landmine can take out anything. But yeah, not only could the Sheridan not take a cannon hit, I was told by one guy that they had some issues with some of the seams splitting, and he was riding one, he could see daylight through a crack. They had one of them that, I forget the specifics, but the gun exploded. It actually killed the loader, I think. And I think it was, they managed to get it to fire without the breech being completely locked, but I could be wrong on that. But I know that because it was in a unit of one of my acquaintances, he was like, yeah, we lost a guy. And he actually went into I've forgotten, but he told me the whole story in detail. So, you could hurt yourself in this thing. And
I wasn't laughing at the guy getting killed. I was laughing because somebody said, "Oh, that's how you drop them on the people." like a practice bomb.
Well, my younger brother, who you guys have heard on this live stream from time to time, actually, if you remember Operation Just Cause in Panama, the 82nd Airborne Division held on to a bunch of them, I think 8 of them, because they gave him some kind of armor asset. Anything's better than nothing. And he dropped a Sheridan in Panama during Operation Just Cause. And kind of the easiest airdrop he ever did. But, well, the thing was, the navigator, he kind of ran the mission on an airdrop because, it's all about where. And he said after all these years of training and doing all these difficult airdrops with cell nav and everything else, so celestial navigation, and all these things they had to do, he goes, we go down Operation Just Cause, and they literally had us drop the thing on like Panama International Airport. He was kind of like, well, this is easy. We'll just fly the localizer and drop it at the marker. But they did lose 2 of them in the parachute drops, though.
Meanwhile, the crowd says, rumor is the new Russian tanks will feature ejection seats.
That's what I was laughing at.
No, it only looks that way when they get hit by anti-tank missile, explode, and the hatches come flying off. God, I've seen, you can all see it on YouTube. There's some footage of these Russian tanks taking these ATGM, these anti-tank guided missile hits. And I mean, the turrets flying. I mean, I'm like, wow. Modern missilery is deadly. This is why tanks have got to be supported by infantry. You got to have somebody to keep the bad guys from being able to get a clear shot at you. That's a hard thing to do. But you see these tanks rolling around in cities. I'm like, man, a guy can come out of any window with a guided missile or an RPG or something and and tanks are more vulnerable from up high. You know, they're like a dog without legs in the city, and and you have got, well, from Save It Private Ryan. Actually, although it's just a movie, but I like the idea that it shows the first thing they try to do was get take out the infantry that was supporting the tank, so that they could get to the tank because it's basically blind. Tank commanders just love getting caught in between buildings. But out in the desert, like during Desert Storm and Desert, I mean, that's where it's like a land battleship. You get these featureless desert. Yeah, you're exposed when you're in something like an Abrams. Like ha 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 ha. I can hit you further than you can hit me, and you can tag out the enemy at will, which we did. But the Sheridans, they finally wound up out at the National Warfare Center being mocked up to look like Russian vehicles, used as Op-4 vehicles. But they did actually see some service in the Gulf War. And if I remember correctly, they fired less than a dozen rounds in combat. I think they were there just because there was something we could get there quickly. Because again, you can put 3 of these things on an airplane for 1 Abrams. Then again, I'd rather have the Abrams. But for the paratroopers, it was great to have some, because even in Panama, they talked about, you came rolling down the street in a Sheridan. Panamanians didn't have much of any anti-tank systems. They were basically a glorified police force. They saw a Sheridan coming down the road with infantry on both sides. They didn't want any part of it. So there's a time and a place. And it stayed in the inventory by hook or by crook for a very long time because we just didn't have anything to replace it. Well,
Pete Hogan calls it the aluminum block Vega of tanks.
Well, Vega, maybe Chevette. Because unlike the Vega, the Sheridan actually had a use.
Yeah.
But that being said, in fairness though, the vehicle, the Army, it was actually in frontline inventory for a fairly short time. They realized, this isn't going to work. But there were certain little niches within the military. Now, this gets back to the whole thing we were talking about light tanks. The Army just almost has a phobia about calling a vehicle a light tank. So when they come out with the M10 Booker, they give it, I forget what is it mobile protected firepower system? I keep forgetting. I have to keep write it down because I'm like, what a bunch of word salad. But I get it. They have to sell this thing to Congress, and you say the word light tank, and now that gets back to where I was going to go earlier. After Vietnam, actually during Vietnam, everybody starts moving away from the whole concept. Actually, the whole Cold War, really after Korea, people started moving away from the light tank concept, and everybody started building what were basically, by World War II standards, heavy tanks. But that also came with its own baggage, so let's call them main battle tanks. The only real heavy tank that we still had was the M103, which was basically an oversized M60 with a really big gun on it. And the Army didn't like them. They got rid of them a few years. The Marines loved them. The Marines took them. They loved them. And they used them for a few more years. And but then, the Marine philosophy, no gun too big. But over the years, we realized the Bradley is an armored fighting vehicle and an armored personnel carrier. It is not a tank. I know it's tracked. I know it's armored. But that's a 30 millimeter Bushmaster, I think it has on it. We got a couple of them knocked out in the Gulf War because they got caught by some tanks. But the thing is, the Bradley, which is a fine little vehicle, but it ain't a tank, and it's not supposed to be used as a tank. And somebody finally said, look, you don't need a sledgehammer to thread a needle. You don't always need an M1 Abrams. We haven't built any new M1 Abrams chassis. They keep getting refurbished, sent back and revamped, but I don't think we built any new Abrams chassis since the 90s. And they're just like, it's an excellent tank, but it's just an expensive tank. You don't need those for every single thing. We need an intermediate step. The Bradley's too small for some stuff. The Abrams too big. So they gave it, the name, Mobile Protected Firepower, It's primarily reconnaissance and infantry support, and it gives the unit commanders something smaller and lighter. And also, and this is important, and Fran would know a lot more about this than I do, but apparently the organization of these vehicles is different. Because you have armor units that, again, infantry and armor assets, you got to, it's very difficult. The Army likes to do things in units, and it's very difficult to say, hey, send me a platoon of tanks. Well, no, the platoon is part of the company, which is part of the battalion. We work as a unit. It can be really hard for, 101st to go, hey, could you send me 3 tanks, now they have, what?
Go ahead, Steve.
Tom Fox says a Swedish tank could be assembled with the included Allen wrench.
Swedish S tank. You guys
That's
are probably...
what he said. Swedish S tank.
Yeah. I don't consider that a tank. I don't care what anybody says. This is a hill I'm willing to die on. The Swedish S tanks, the Stridsvagn. That's as close as I can get to how you're supposed to pronounce it. The Stridsvagn is not a tank. The Stridsvagn is a tank destroyer. It doesn't have a turret. The gun sticks out of the chassis, just like the Sturmgeschütz and the Jagdpanther and the Jagdpanzer. The gun sticks out of the chassis, and you got to turn the whole frickin' tank to aim it. It's an ambush weapon. In fact, it is a classic tank destroyer. That's the hill I'm going to die on. In my money, it is. Although he's probably right about the Allen wrench. By the way, that thing had a really long service life, and apparently would even be a viable weapon system today. It's got like freaking 70-degree sloped armor. It's basically a wedge with a gun poking out front.
Well, they sell them at IKEA, right?
Let me grab a picture of one real quick, just in case there's somebody out there who doesn't know what I'm talking about. Yep, Stridsvagn. Okay.
Mexican tanks come with 3 cases of tequila.
I was in the wrong army.
Thank you, Shaggy Buds.
Hang on, I have to hear just a second, guys. But then the Swedes were also planning to fight a completely defensive war. They have no intention of attacking anybody, so they can tailor the vehicle to their needs as a defensive weapon. Okay, this is a Stridsvagn, and like I said, it's just a bloody wedge. And I mean, it would be hard to knock that thing out shooting. First off, it sits really, really low. The suspension on it elevates so it can go up and come down. And
But Max, tank destroyer is a doctrine, says Mike Freddy.
This is true. Oh, man. Wow! Heist on my own petard. You're right. It's not a tank destroyer. It's a self-propelled gun.
Official tank of the Swedish bikini team.
But wait a minute. I can defend my point. It was designed to lay an ambush to knock out Russian tanks. Ergo, tank destroyer doctrine. Aha!
That's right.
But I mean, you got to give the Stridsvagn credit. It is a purpose-built machine, and I will make the argument. I'll go one step further. You can make the argument that it was 100% effective because they never lost one in combat, and the Russians stayed out of Sweden. If a weapon system is...
Italian tanks have 12 reverse gears and 4 forward.
If I was a French tank.
French tanks, wine dispenser and bread box right next to the storage bin for the white flag.
See, the only alcohol dispenser now, you know what? I can't even make that joke now. Jeez. I was gonna say the only German tanks have a beer dispenser. Italian tanks and French tanks have wine dispensers. Americans get coffee and Coca-Cola. But
British tanks have
tea.
and have a built-in tea kettle.
They do. That's not a joke. They do. They absolutely
Really?
do. Yes. In fact, when the chieftain was going through the chieftain, I believe it was, which is he was showing where the kettle was. Yes. Um,
Barry wants to know, what are those things on the side of the tank that look like canisters?
those are grenade launchers, usually smoke grenades. Uh, if I'm and they have to be reloaded from the outside. They're basically one shot deals. But basically, as I understand it, if you think somebody's out there with if you're whether you're on the move or you're stationary and you need to obfuscate the battlefield, you can pop those things out. They'll burst out in front of you and create a smoke screen, at least for a little while. Although I would imagine they also can. If I remember this when the guy was giving me the tour of the Sheridan, and again, this is 13-year-old Max here. You see him on the Sheridan also, and I believe he said they could also they had a fragmentation grenade or mortar that could go in there, and if there was if you thought infantry was advancing on you, you could fire those things off, and believe me, they'd lose interest real fast. Now here it is; those things are bolt-ons. Here's a Sheridan without the grenade launchers on it. But those are I've actually seen those things used in demonstrations, and I guess it's up to the tank commander. I've only seen smoke, but my understanding is that there is also not a canister, but a fragmentation version. And since we're on all that, but getting back, I don't know how long it'll be. Everybody thinks either AFE or Tamiya or Dragon, and my money's probably on Dragon. I'll be the first ones with a model of the Booker, but but it is a classic light tank. I don't care what they call it. It's a classic light tank. The armor on it is fairly thin, but it's not designed to survive because it's not supposed to do battle with tanks. It's supposed to look and take it from an former infantryman. It's really handy to have a couple of those with you when you're even at the brigade level, if you've got a handful of them, because the infantry, even leg infantry or airborne infantry, which are light infantry, when they're moving along, if they come up across it's a bunker or something like that, the easiest thing in the world is bring up a vehicle like this to knock it out. They can outrange it. They can sit back with relative safety, protected by infantry, knock the thing out, and you guys can continue on with your push before it loses any momentum. And you'd be amazed how fast, depending on the topography, you'd be surprised how fast one or two bunkers can hold up the advance of an entire battalion or division. Now, people are like, well, why don't you call in air support or artillery? Well, you can if you have it. But artillery's indirect fire. Getting one to drop right on target can be tricky. It can be done. But there's just nothing easier than grabbing the field phone on the back of that thing and go, hey, Chuck, right up the road here, we got a bunker. Point it out to him, let him, boom, pop, gone. Okay, let's move on. It's fast, it's efficient, and it psychologically helps the infantry to have that kind of companionship. Yeah, you can call in a mission from fighter bombers, bring in the F-16s, fly a $4 million mission to drop laser guided ordnance, or wait for hopefully you don't even know if your artillery is going to be set up. Well, let's drop one of those $1 million copperheads on it. Okay, yeah, to knock out a $200 bunker, or you can roll that thing up, pop off a couple of rounds, be done with it, and keep going. But it's just it gives the battlefield commander flexibility, and it's been light enough. There are bridges it can go over that Abrams can't go over. It's cheaper to operate. It's just less hassle. It's a kind of vehicle that we've been needing for a long time. And when Sheridans were used like that, they worked fairly well. The Ontos, which is the most absurd little military vehicle ever, which only the Marines used. I think the Army played with it and said no thanks. This, in many ways, is about the most... what?
Craig Swain says, the tactic we practiced over and over again against bunkers, the infantry would ask me to drive my M1A1 up. We then asked the enemy in the bunker to hold one of our 120 millimeter rounds.
I got a little military humor. Okay. So in a few seconds, you guys are going to see a picture of the Ontos. And it's literally, if I'm not mistaken, a Greek word that means thing. And before you say it, yes, this is the armored vehicles, what the Volkswagen thing was to cars. So it is
a Renwall kit.
Yes. Oh, good luck finding one today. All the hatches open. I remember, I think it was Noel Pope had the first time it was a Renwall kit of the Ontos that he showed me. But the Ontos is 6 recoilless rifles. Now, somebody in the middle of battle, if they had to be reloaded, had to go out there and reload them. yeah, okay.
I'm not going out there.
But hold on.
I went out there last time.
Hold on. You will notice on top of the upper recoil on each recoilless rifle, there's a 50 caliber spotting gun. You could wait. You could tap at a target until you were hitting it with the 50 cal, and then you knew that the recoilless rifles were on target, and you could let go. The Marines used these things, especially apparently in Vietnam, and because they were so small, you can tell by that guy's head, these are small vehicles, right? They could get around in the cities, and they were really handy for knocking out bunkers. And the Marines just freaking loved them. And they used them all the time, and so they worked. The Army was like, that's okay, we'll stay with traditional tanks. But the Marines and the Army have different missions.
Will it shoot down balloons?
Yeah, depending on the altitude, why not? But the recoilless rifle is, a pretty wicked little weapon in its own right. They kind of fell out of. I don't know. There are a few armies that still use them. I think most people, technology's kind of passed them up. More or less, kind of a glorified bazooka in a way. The bazooka shoots the whole rocket. This thing, only the projectile goes forward, and the empty casing comes out the back. But I was curious why recoilless rifles over bazookas, and I looked on the numbers on them. I think some of the later bazookas actually had a higher velocity and a longer range, but the recoilless rifles could be made a lot bigger. And but eventually they kind of fell out. I imagine there's probably still some people use them, but this weird looking thing worked. And military logic, rule number 1, Murphy's rule number 1: if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. And
okay.
But
that's the motto of motor vehicles.
But anyway, so we had the but I personally, for myself, I'm glad to see that we've acquired some kind of intermediate vehicle. The Abrams are getting old, although the Army does take good care of them, and but there are times it's literal overkill. And I think there's been a gap in our armor force that this will plug pretty nicely. Whether or not they'll be successful in the field, of course, maintenance, logistics, training are all a huge part of that. But it's also going to be how they use it. The battlefield commander tries to use this thing like a heavy tank. It's not going to go well. But at least they put a 105 on it, so it has enough gun that if in a pinch it's got to shoot at enemy armor, it's got at least a fighting chance. So there's that. But the tank doctrine has changed a lot along with technology. And unfortunately, I organizationally, I think something like this was needed. My guess is I'm giving 3-to-1 odds that Dragon comes out with the first model of this thing, probably followed by AFE and then Tamiya. And if Tamiya lives up to their usual way of doing things, they won't build a model of it till they're able to go and take 10,000 photographs and get engineering drawings, because that's how Tamiya rolls.
Shaggy says, okay, your turn to jump out and reload. Who goes?
I'm pretty sure that's a rank-based thing. Why do I have to keep reloading? Because you're the private.
It'd be nice if they put a back door on the thing so you didn't have to get out the front.
All right, Steve, here's your tank question for the day. When Dragon or AFE comes out with a model of this thing, how much is it going to cost? I say $54.95 in 135 scale.
I
Steve?
Anybody got any clues?
Steve,
Steve?
you there? Uh-oh, we lost comm.
I think Steve fell off.
No, I got you kind of like cut out for a minute and then came back
Oh,
on.
I say your tank question for the day, Steve. When one of the kit model companies
Yes.
finally comes out with a model of this thing, how much is it going to cost? I'm saying $59.95.
59 or 69, yeah.
Ken, care to hazard a guess?
But and he'll cut it out for 49
Mm.
from Taycom.
Oh, okay. Well, Taycom ain't cheap. You know, Taycom may be first, though. You know, they're pretty good about that. Which brings us back to kit models and model tanks and stuff. Oops, model tanks and stuff. I thought I would talk about.
Yantos had a double wide back door.
You did,
On the
yeah.
Ringwall kit
That's right.
Worked.
That's right. Now,
There you go.
we're going to talk a little bit. I'll tell you what. Stand by, guys. You're about to get full screen maxed here. There we
Right,
go.
prepare.
Brace, brace, brace. This is the Academy model M3 Stewart Honey that I just cracked open, 135 scale, which was gifted to me by a glue trooper. Thank you very much, whoever it was. Take a bow, because my memory has gone to soft. And I've always loved the Stewart. I just something about it. I just always, probably because it was. I always thought about the Sheridan as the first armored vehicle I was in, which is correct. But turns out that one of these old M3s, like this one, not an M5, but this version, the M3, was out in front of a junkyard, Mount Pleasant, Florida, Hootie Paramore's, where I used to live, and we used to go out and play in it all the time. God, the thing was covered with sharp edges and rust. How we didn't cut ourselves and get tetanus, I don't know. But anyway, so after all the talking about tanks, I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to get started on this thing. Make a nice side project while I'm working on the Arizona. And I was amazed, I was a little leery after the Tiger. It's like, oh God, please don't let me leak tracks again. Well, it comes with rubber band tracks. Okay. Very nice ones, by the way. But it also comes with the option for not pinned, but track links that you glue together. But they have these little triangles. I took a picture I can show you.
The Stewart is cute.
Oh, Stewart's very cute.
Herman thinks so.
Going to show you a picture here. Okay. Here's a close-up of the tracks and the links. All right. And you put two of these triangular pieces on one on each side, and that's how you link it to the next track. In fact, I got a picture of the instruction showing how it goes together. And I cannot thank these guys enough for giving the option, for giving you both the there you see how they go together. By the way, it comes with this thread also for making your tow cable. But here you see you've got the track link, the lower left there. You got the track link, and then you use these triangular teeth on either side to hold it together, just like the real tank. And until I saw that, I didn't realize that was how you link the tracks on a Stewart. So once again, education has taken place. And I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use. I'll probably start linking track and see if I get frustrated. I might just screw it, or I might do one on each side. But it's just great, I think, that they give you both of them to have the option. Now, it probably cost the company 10 cents to do this, but I think it says a lot on Academy Models' behalf that they put that option in there. A hardcore modeler can start linking, and the weekend guy's like, nah, not going to do it, can throw together his rubber tracks. And it feels like a nice rubber, too. It's not really it may be a vinyl, but it feels like rubber. And they look good. I mean, you can see them in the picture better than I can show you on the camera. But I'm looking forward to getting started on this. I thought we'd look at some of the other parts on it. So here is the 1/35th scale chassis. Looks great. I don't see any flash. And, I mean, that looks good to me. So, I tell you what, this thing's been staring at me for a while. And I gave my M41 Balker Bulldog to Bruce, the Mystic Modeler. So hopefully, he said he'd never built a tank. So hopefully he'll get that going at some point soon. I'd like to see it because he does. He works very quickly. Now, there's something else about this tank that I love. And it feeds into something we were talking about earlier. And yes, it's Godzilla. I'm sorry, in this case, it'd be Gojira. Okay, I have to show you this picture. They give you 3 sets of decals. Okay. Hold on, let me fit that to the screen. Transform, fit to screen. Okay. They give you American...
Lance thinks the most beautiful tank is the MBT-70.
Oh, I love that tank.
The
MBT-70, yeah, that is a beautiful tank. We'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so, okay, here is the decal sheet, and they give you for 3 countries. They give you American with stars, they give you the British, the red and white flags, and they give you Japanese. Now, when I first saw that, I thought maybe there's some kind of unit marker, but no. Though apparently the Japanese captured a bunch of them, and they liked them, they put them to use. Now, so that's why they have the Japanese flags that go on the chassis. On the turret, a lot of people don't know this, and I've forgotten this, but the Japanese sometimes use rounded white stars as their identifier. So those actually go on the turret. But I was thinking, if you put it in Japanese markings, you just gotta have it fighting Godzilla. 37 millimeter gun and an inch of armor against Godzilla. Yep. He's not even gonna have to use his breath. He's probably just gonna cough on them and they'll melt. But
Kudakawa says, it's a live stream now that we're talking about Godzilla.
Everybody has their favorite kits. Now, if somebody I'll make you guys a deal. Somebody sends me a 1/35th scale Godzilla, I'll put all my armor in front of it. Let's see. But the I like that they give you all these options on decals. They give you the options on tracks, and so far, the little bit I've played with it, it looks like everything's just falls into place. So I don't see too much of a. Hopefully, it'll go together quickly and easily. By the way, some folks were asking me about the Arizona. This is a blurry photo. I did put a coat of red paint on it, and I primed the outer hull in black. Now I'm giving that a couple of days for it all to cure nice and firm. I will be taping off that black to make the water line when I'm waiting. I ordered the paints for it. The red I know is a little too bright, but that's just the base coat. I'm gonna find a darker red, but not that hull color that was more of a Japanese color for it. But that's where it sits right now. And that was just for those who are asking for an update. I got my CA glue. I want to get started on the photo etch, but tomorrow's my last day at home before I go back to work. So
Godzilla would lose big time to a Tiger tank.
I can prove you wrong. Watch my Godzilla versus the Wehrmacht. I have that exact battle, and it did not go well for the Tigers. And it's a documentary. Here you go. Here's the.
That must mean it's true.
That's right. Well, Ken, you're the host. So here is the decal location for the Stewart in Japanese markings. And you think it's kind of interesting that a tank as small as the Stewart still has a cupola for the commander, and which is thinking ahead. A lot of tanks that don't have cupolas get criticized because it limits what the commander can see. But then other people, but you stick the cupola on it, it's up too tall, so pick your poison. Excuse me. Let's see. Was there one other? I think there was one other picture.
I remember long time ago, I saw a picture of a tank in Vietnam. Apparently, it was during the rainy season because it sunk up to its gun in mud.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just, for those who didn't see it, this is my build it like a 12-year-old, all I used was red and black marker, black paint, and glue, and my X-Acto knife. So that's the constellation.
Kraft says, Max, you are biased. It's cool.
But anyway, now, there was one other thing that I just stumbled onto recently that I talked about very briefly that we chat about. And
ooh, I like the Connie kit. That's nice.
Yeah, that's got. I'm sitting here looking at it. It's right here. It is now my new desk display. Okay, let me miniaturize the camera here.
Didn't they put the tractor on the other side of the stairs? So
It depends. Some of them are set up. A lot of them are set up differently. A lot of you guys may recognize this lovable, charitable gentleman. This is Ernst Mach, the guy who came up with the concept of speed of sound being Mach 1. And when we I meant to grab an airplane up here. Let's see. This won't work.
Well, come here. Weird quoted Mach 1.
Okay. When you think of the Second World War, we think of, straight-wing fighter planes. We don't think in the terms of Mach number or in critical Mach. Okay. Now, I was watching this. You know what? There's a Spitfire. Hold on. Hang on. Trust me, I'm doing this for your benefit. Hang on. Much better airplane to use. A Spitfire. Okay. Okie dokie. Trust me, guys. I saved your retinas from burning out. So, we think of Mach speed. We think of jets, which is, of course, even the jet I fly today. Everything's, our speed and everything above a certain altitude, about roughly 29,000 feet, is based on Mach. Now, the early days of jets, it may not shock you to know that some things were not terribly well thought out, like getting in and out of the bloody thing. This picture is an F-94 Starfire. And as you may have guessed, the pilot's easy for him to get in and out, but the weapon systems operator, the radar guy, his getting in and out was just a bloody afterthought. I guess it was the same way for the T-33 because that's what it was based on. It really dawned on me how tough it was to get in and out of the back of one of those things with all your gear on. So I was like, how do you design a jet and not think about that? But okay. So anyway, I actually just used that picture because I thought it was funny. It's like, no love for the backseater to give the guy in back. But apparently, during World War II, Mach speed very much was part of the design test criteria. And Eric Winkle Brown is several of his interviews were strung together recently in about a half-hour video. And I did not realize this, but the guys at Farnborough, when they were, that's a captured Focke-Wulf 190 in British markings that were testing. And he said they tested their Mach speed. And when they were designing fighters, critical Mach speed and tactical Mach speed were a big factor. And this is where, I don't think I ever even stopped to consider this before. This is where the design of fighter planes was far more advanced than I had realized. The Focke-Wulf 190 and the Messerschmitt 109 both had what was called a tactical Mach number of about 0.75. Now, at the critical Mach number, you basically lose control of the airplane. Now, I'm just real quick going to give the 10-second background. When you are moving through the air subsonic, obviously we all know just as a boat pushes through the water and creates a bow wave, an airplane moving through the air compresses the air in front of it. And the lower the speed, the less it matters, the less it compresses it. But you start getting up at higher speeds, it starts to become an issue. A lot of us heard of compressibility, where the air literally starts compressing in front of the airplane, can't get out of the way in time. But that's not what this is about. And I think it's going to be another thing on compressibility. And as I listened to it, I was like, no, it's not. So, a lot of you guys know that Bernoulli's principle, the air flows over the wing, the air moving faster across the top creates a vacuum, produces lift. Well, that means the air flowing over the wing is going faster than the airplane is going through the air as an entire unit. And for example, the example they gave here is if the airplane is pushing through the air at Mach 0.8, the fastest point of the airflow over the wing is hitting Mach 1. And this is where you start running into a whole basket load of problems, especially if you have a thick-winged airplane. So there were airplanes like the Thunderbolt and the P-38 Lightning that were really fast. And they had, what?
Tom wants to know, is this going to be on the test?
Yes. There will be a quiz after the show. So what happens is you take an airplane like the Thunderbolt or the Hellcat or the P-38, lots of power, big propellers, and they can drag that airplane to the air. They can drag that airframe through the sky at high speed. Okay, maybe faster than their enemy in level flight, but perhaps because the enemy fighter doesn't have the same power to weight ratio you have, or the power to drag ratio. But depending on how thin the wing of that enemy fighter is, if he rolls off into a dive, he can get up around Mach 0.8 and still have control of the airplane, whereas you would lose control at Mach 0.74. I think he said the tactical Mach on a Thunderbolt was like Mach 0.64 or something. It was really low. Even though the airplane was fast, and here's where it really gets confusing. Well, you have to understand the difference between Mach and airspeed. Airspeed, there's about 5 different kinds of airspeed. There's true airspeed, calibrated airspeed, indicated airspeed, and then of course ground speed minus headwinds or plus tailwinds, calibrated airspeed. So as the airplane gets dragged through the sky, as you get higher and higher, your airspeed indicator isn't reading any higher because the air is getting thinner. So as far as your airspeed considered, nah, man, I'm still showing 240. But when you adjust for temperature and altitude and pressure, you realize you're really going well over 400. Okay, the indicated airspeed it has to be calibrated and adjusted. It gets confusing. But Mach doesn't have that problem. Mach is, your ratio to the speed of sound. However, don't forget, sound moves slower in thin air. So speed of sound at sea level, I think, is a little over 1,000 miles an hour, but up at 35,000 feet, it's like 700 miles an hour. Huge difference. Well, your pressure and the shock waves on the airplane are better measured in Mach because they're fairly consistent. And but by that I mean Mach 7.4 at any altitude will have the same effect on the airplane. But when you're chasing somebody or something, the Messerschmitt pilots learned that they could push it up to about Mach 0.75 and they could still turn their plane. The Americans couldn't. In fact, the Americans would tumble out of control at that point. And the guys who learned this were able to use it effectively. Your airspeed is not an indicator of Mach unless you can take that speed and calculate for your altitude, the temperature, and the density. But you can't do that in the middle of a dogfight.
Max.
Yeah, what?
Max, I think you're getting a little bit too technical.
I know. I was sitting in arenas going, holy crap. So anyway, Winkle Brown was pointing out that even during World War II, some of the British planes already had Mach meters on them. And
now here's a really good technical term: terminal airspeed. How fast you're flying when you crash and die. There you go.
Well, the thing he was getting at is that what they had to know was how fast they could go in Mach. And Americans didn't know this. We didn't have the instrumentation in the airplane. You couldn't make the adjustments in combat. And so when we started flying jets, at this point, we finally caught one of the, hey, you know what? We need to put Mach meters in these airplanes and do everything based on Mach, and which is how we do it today, to this very day. And that was one of those things that when I saw that, I was like, what it does is it alters the way I look at World War II aircraft now. I realized there was a dimension I'd never considered about World War II fighter planes. And that is, yeah, they can have all the speed, they can have all of this performance climb rate, but Mach is still an issue. And you can have the slower airplane affect a getaway simply because he can take a higher Mach number, push it over, and scream for the ground. And heck, under that can do, I think the Spitfire could do like Mach 8 or so. He was talking about one Spitfire test pilot flying, it was a P-11 version, that was trying to see how high a Mach number they could get. This is during the war, by the way. They were trying to see how fast they could get the Spitfire to go. And he got it up like Mach 0.92, like 92% the speed of sound. And
Garfield says, I got lost right after Max said, good evening, Glue Trooper.
But hold on. You're going to love this story. You can go out and watch the video. I need to link it in so you guys can watch the whole thing. But this British pilot, he said, fortunately, the guy was about 6'2" and very muscular, because Winkle said that I just didn't have the strength to do this exercise, so we gave it to him because he was so strong, because they figured there were going to be about 100 pounds of pressure on the stick. So he screams this thing down from like 42,000 feet, because it was on those experimental P-11 models. He comes screaming down, and at about Mach 0.92, he's trying to pull the airplane up, and the propeller and the gearbox rip out. Just tear themselves off the airplane. Okay? This sudden shift, losing all that weight, the airplane goes like this. He blacks out from the G-forces. He wakes up at like 39,000 feet. That airplane with the loss of weight went nose up. It went nose up when it lost the weight, and had so much inertia that even without a propeller, it climbed like 20,000+ feet, at a very steep angle. And he woke up when he got to the top. And now, at this point, I would have said, well, that was interesting. Time to bail out. Does he bail out? No. He's a test pilot. He looks down, sees their airfield down below him from, 6-7 miles up, and decides, you know what? Now that it's slowed up, you know what? It's still the tail sagging. While I bet if I dropped the undercarriage, it would balance right out with the drag. So he drops the landing gear, the nose comes down, he spirals down, and dead sticks the airplane and lands it. Okay? Which in itself, if the story ended right there, I would have been thoroughly impressed. But as our good friend Mike Machat likes to say, oh, but there's more. When they look at the airplane, they can see daylight between the wing roots and the fuselage.
Oh, that's not a good thing.
He had literally swept the wings back about 3 degrees on each side. The engineers figured the plane would come apart at 9 Gs. He pulled 11. And I'm like, if anybody other than Winkle Brown told that story, I would have gone, bah humbug. But, it's Winkle Brown, if there's ever a credible authority. And I was flabbergasted by that. But I was thinking, getting back to models, there's your model opportunity. Build a Spitfire with semi-detached wings, no proper gearbox. Winkle Brown says, good show, mate. But anyway, that was just a story I had to share. And I'll try and find that video and put it in the comment section after the live stream. And there was one other thing we wanted to talk about. My wife asked me today. She is getting loaded with commissions. She's made just about every character from Star Trek or Star Wars, and people just want more. So the kit model company should be taking notes. But she was asking me, about the price of kits, and I had mentioned that stuff that Atlantis puts out, which are repops of old kits, are obviously much cheaper. She goes, well, are they any good, or new? What's better, new kits or old kits? And I said that, well, the new kits are unquestionably better. I mean, I only have to look at this Stewart to determine that. But a lot of the old kits were very good. And she was like, well, how much do they cost? And I was describing the prices to her. And she's like, well, is it worth it to pay that extra money for them? And I'm like, well, that depends on who you ask. Everybody's got a different view on the value of dollars versus the quality of the kit. But then she asked a great question. That was, are people building these old kits because they're better value or because nostalgia? And I was thinking, I'd have to say, for the most part, it's probably nostalgia. That little Aero Command, what?
The crowd wants to know: could your wife make a Snake Plissken doll?
She already did. I'm pretty sure she made Snake Plissken. I seem to remember that.
As opposed to a Snake Plissken figure.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that. Somebody sent me something that I probably shouldn't share, but it's just funny. Let me see if I can find it. But I think the older kits, some of it's historical. I mean, people, like Fran has a magnificent collection of vintage kits that he still builds, but for a lot of folks, I think the kits are more of, I built that as a kid, I want to build one again. But the repops have the advantage of being reasonably priced. That little Aero Commander she got me, which she made an offer, she got a good deal on it. But I heard somebody out there has got one for sale for like what was it, Steve? $169, $149?
$169.
$169, and I'm like, ouch! That's just, and I'd be fine as a buyer, but I was just shocked by the.
Well, I mean, today I was in Hobby Lobby, and I was looking at their kit aisle, and there were two other men in the aisle, and one guy turned to the other guy and said, "I can't believe the price of these kits," and he pointed to a AMP 63 the Koopies. I remember buying it as a kid, it was $1.95. And now it's $40. Which, okay, there's, inflation, the price of plastics went up, the price of cardboard went up for the package. Okay, understood. But the problem is, this is why there's no young kids getting into the hobby. Because to buy it, just let's take a car, a 25th scale car with some paint and with some glue. It's a $60 investment. And you got to build a lot of them before you get good at it. And it's that kits are now becoming more of a thing for older people who could afford them and that remember what a lot of them were, and they buy it because, I had that when I was a kid. Now, there are some new kits coming out, people like Monarch and, Round 2's coming out with a lot of new stuff, and Revell's coming out with some new stuff. But, the entry-level price is $35.
Yeah.
It comes to a lot of money. And younger people would rather spend that $35 on something else than to sit down and spend $35 plus to build a kit that goes on the shelf. And that's a big problem, which is why I think the future of the hobby business is going to be downloading a 3D file, printing the pieces, and putting that together, as opposed to having a model kit company spend untold amount of money to cut a mold and packaging and shipping and everything else. I like the Godzilla mugshots.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior Godzilla? Sorry, dude. He's in jail. He's been busted by the Tokyo Popo. I guess that height thing is in meters.
Yeah, it looks like.
I mean, I'll give you a perfect example, and I will.
You're breaking up, Steve.
You're breaking up, Steve.
Steve?
Now you're almost not there.
Steve? Earth to Steve.
Whatever you're doing,
What?
don't do it.
Yeah, you're cutting
Yeah,
out.
Okay. Not doing anything. The phone connection's really bad tonight. I mean, I'm constantly going to flea markets and antique stores and, you know, places that sell old stuff, and I scour them for old model kits. Now, I found a kit today in the original box. All the parts were there, the decals were there, the instructions were there. The kit was built in 1956, and I bought it. I paid $20 for it.
What is it?
Well, I don't want to say it because there's a company that's repopped it. My point is, I bought the original kit for less than what the repop goes for.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
You know, and I mean, I scour eBay. I mean, I look for stuff that I'd like to have, and you know, the prices are all over the map. I mean, there's some prices for the same kit. You can get 6 different prices from 6 different people that go from a low to a high, and it's the same kit. It's the same quality. It's the same. It's some are in a sealed box. Some are, you know, shrunk wrap. It's just the pricing is all over the map, and for someone who would be entering into the hobby, it's very confusing because there's a lot of places to buy kits now that there never used to be. I mean, when we were kids and bought them, you went to the hobby store, you went to the, you know, local retail store. That's where you bought them. You know, now you have all these secondary markets and online things that you can buy them at. But the prices are very expensive. You know, we were just talking about what do we think the tank kit would go for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of us are talking about more than our first week's wages.
And we had some different prices, you know, but it was in a high range. And that's the issue.
You got a similar problem with model railroading too. A lot of the stuff that's available nowadays, it's expensive. It's accurate and beautiful, but way too expensive for some, you know, 10-year-old kid who wants to get into it. He ends up getting something that's, you know, 10, 20, 15 years old on eBay and starts out that way.
You guys keep going. I'm going to be back in just a second. I have to.
You know, and the other thing is we, you know, I mean, we're older. We know what this stuff was when it first came out. We probably built many of the, you know, almost the stuff that's repop. We built a lot of it. But, you know, the prices now, I mean, if you go to Hobby Lobby and you look, I mean, I'm just speaking for the cars, 25th scale cars, they're $39. Now, granted, you wait till they have the 40 off sale because nobody's going to pay full retail for them. But, you know, the price keeps going up. And after a while, it becomes the decision of how bad do I really want it, and is it worth that much money to me? You know, and once it becomes that discussion, then it becomes more of a luxury than a, you know, oh, yeah, okay, I'll just buy this and I'll do it and I'll make it. I mean, and I understand I certainly understand the costs, but, you know, there's a couple of kits that are coming out that I'm very interested in getting, and they start at $75. That's a lot of money for a plastic kit.
Yeah, it is. Yep. And then you got to go and buy paint.
I mean,
jars of paint, they're really expensive.
Yeah, spray paint's $8, $10 a can, depending upon where you buy it. You know, if you do a 25th scale car, you're in for $50, $60. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. I easily spent that in paint and stuff, you know, just supplies, putting that bow mark together.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's crazy. I mean, and that's not to say that the kits aren't of good quality, because they are.
Yeah,
you know,
they are.
Not, you know, and I mean, I went to a place today, and there were many kits. I mean, they had kits in there that were what I would consider vintage kits, but not from first line manufacturers. and they wanted like $40 for these kits that was maybe a $3.98 kit when it was new, and it was a bad kit to begin with. I mean, it wasn't like it was, a great kit. I'm like, gee, this is, it's a little tough. I mean, yeah, there's some value out there. You have to look for it, but it's detrimental to the hobby when you have to say, I have to search for a deal, as opposed to the regular price is acceptable to pay for it. And we all come up against that. It's not just, me or you or Max.
Yeah.
But
sometimes if I see a kid that's really interested in, like, for example, just to give you an example, like a radio control or model railroading, something like that, I've got tons of stuff, some things, and if I've got an extra train car or that I don't really care about, but it's a decent condition, or maybe an airplane, and I see a kid who's really, I'll give the thing to the kid and say, here, go have fun with that. And you never know what's going to happen. The kid, that might shape his entire life. You don't know. But it's a good way of mentoring somebody and maybe get somebody into the hobby that never would have considered it before.
Well, I mean, look, I do shows because I work in a capacity for Atlantis. And, when I do a show and we get, we bring samples, I mean, if I see a young kid who comes over and shows some level of interest, and I engage him in a discussion and ask him what kind of kits he likes to go, I give him a kit.
Cool.
Because it's not going to cost us anything in the overall scheme of things to give away a kit. But it, like you said, hopefully it would get this kid interested to the point where he may decide he wants to build, some kits. But it's a slippery slope. I mean, I went to a hobby store a few weeks ago, and they came out with a model of the Fly from the original Fly movie.
Oh God, this hurts.
And I'm not that big into figural kits, but I said, this would be pretty unique. This would be interesting. I could see getting this. Well, the kit was $75. And I go, it's not worth $75 to me,
Yeah, exactly. It has to be worth it, Jay.
I had to run get some cough medicine, but I have my cough medicine now. So.
Well, it's a different color tonight.
Same color it's always been. In my TWA cup.
Well, there you go.
Fly the friendly skies.
Because we're just lamenting the price of kits.
I heard. I've been monitoring for a moment. I didn't want to just cut in. The cost of kits, to say it's gotten out of hand is a little bit of an understatement. And I understand the industry's trying to stay alive. They don't have anywhere near the volume they used to have, so they're trying to make it up in price and in fairness, quality. But you can only go so far before you just wind up killing the golden goose, so to speak. And
look, I mean, the more expensive. Shipping is more expensive. Packaging is more. I mean, all of the components.
You're cutting out again there, Steve. Earth to Steve. Earth to Steve.
Can't hardly hear anything now, Steve.
I got a problem here. Everything you guys say, it cuts in and out. I don't know what's going on.
That goes both ways.
What?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out also. But
I'm just curious. I'm just curious. Somebody, if in the comments, if anybody has ever given a kit to a kid,
I have.
Who never done it before, could.
These days, you might get in trouble doing it.
Good to see that.
You might get in trouble doing that these days, Ken, because hey, kid, want a model airplane? So I made the mistake of leaving. I made the mistake of leaving a little tin of candy in front of the model Constellation after I was done with it. I put it on the shelf, and that's the shelf where I keep my little snacks and stuff. And I came back later, and the tray was empty and the Connie was full.
Okay.
I don't know if the picture's populated on yours yet, but
Yeah, we see it. Yeah, I saw it.
where did my candy go? Yeah, that was it's it's a tragedy what is happening to the industry. But you know what? I hate to say this, but my concern is that our industry, a lot of things, had a time, so to speak. And I'm starting to worry that, maybe the kit model, like you say, with 3D printing just around the corner and everything, I got a feeling that the kit model industry as we know it may, in not too distant a future, become a little more than, hey, order the file and, pump it into your machine and it'll pop a kit out for you.
Well, that's where I think it's going to go, because it will be cheaper and it won't be quicker. I mean, even though the speeds of 3D printers have gotten better, and they will get better, but I think 5-10 years down the road, it's going to be easier to make a file that somebody can download than it will be to cut a mold, make a package, and run them off and ship them.
Well, by the way, I had this here the whole time. I didn't need to point it out for those who don't. This is the vertical volute suspension system. Just springs up in there and the wheels bounce and pushes them back out. And so that's I how can I put this? I'm happy to see that there are still kit model companies out there making new products, putting them out there. God alone outside of Tamiya, and Hasegawa and a few of those that have, built-in customer base globally. I don't know how some of these companies even keep the doors open, to be honest. Let's think. Just real quick, how many kit model companies are gone forever, even though their molds may still be around? Frog,
Lindbergh,
Lindbergh, Aurora, Revell. It kind of is what was Monogram for all practical purposes. They almost gone. And Renwall.
And the other thing is, every time a company goes out of business, no matter who acquires them, molds disappear.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They either get broken, they get lost in shipping. They have employees who were disgruntled and
oh, that's Johan big time, yeah.
For the metal value. So stuff disappears every time molds are acquired from company to company. So stuff goes away that you'll never see again.
Oh, and I'm thinking about the Japanese companies like Marusan, and a bunch of Japanese companies have disappeared. A lot of them were small, like Mania. They never put out more than about 10 kits. But and then you have ones like Banner. I think that USS Arizona is the only Banner kit they ever put out. And when you think about what it takes to get a model into production, get the molds cut, get the boxes printed, get it out there, how do you make one kit and then just sell it off and disappear? Unless maybe they made it on contract for somebody. But it's just one of those things that makes, it astonishes me that anybody even goes into this industry. I mean, Rick and Pete are kit model guys, so... And them and Nick Argento have largely stayed away from making their own molds, which was probably a wise thing to do. I think they've had a few made and some of them fixed, but...
well, they don't have to when they have 750.
Most of which are usable.
Yeah.
Did Atlantis ever have a Godzilla license?
Max.
Yeah. What?
I just sent you a email.
Okay.
About a 3D printed tank.
Rob brings up a good point. He says, with molds going to China, is there any chance that they would come back to the U.S.?
No.
There's not a snowball's chance in hell you're ever getting your molds back.
No, I don't believe you could get them out of the country no matter how hard you tried. Huh. Yeah, it looks like a Panzer III. I could tell because of the 6 road was. This is a 3D printed tank. Ken just sent me a picture
There's a whole website with nothing but 3D printed tanks on them.
No, that's cool. I am gonna say something I don't know what I'm talking about here, but that never stopped me before. Maybe I shouldn't go there. Now everyone's interested. So I think I'm going to make this a generic statement. I'm not going to point to any particular company. There are U.S. kit model makers who have all their stuff actually made in China, even though they own the molds. I don't believe in the current world situation that they would ever be allowed to remove those from China. And even if they could get government permission, I'm not really sure what would happen to the molds regardless. But I honestly think that the molds are effectively held captive.
There are Revell molds over in China that were part of the hobby code deal that you will never get back from China.
Yeah.
Chuck says Lionel got their molds back.
That was a while back. Things have gotten worse.
Atlantis has molds over there that they can't get back, and they were Revell.
There you go again.
Today's 3D Lex detail provided texture model companies regularly provide. Yeah, I agree. I don't think 3D printing at this point is up to injected styrene, but 10, 20 years down the road, who knows?
Well, if you go with the resin 3D printing, that has pretty high resolution.
Yeah, it is. In 3 years, it'll be the same.
Oh,
which is kind of messy. But
before you guys get out of here,
in 3D printing.
I need the glue troopers to comment on. So some of them had trouble with the green screen, and then I left just the green screen behind me as a backdrop, and now I moved it out of the way. You can actually see it right over there, and I moved the models over a little closer to help work as a sound pad. And I brought in one of the studio lights and everything so I could get better lighting. And I've got my new camera. I need some feedback on the audio quality, the visual, and if you prefer me to use a superimposed backdrop or just stay with something like this. This is a fun live stream. You know, I do my research, what I can cobble together so we can have some fun. But after a while, it just turns into a gab session, which is all I really want it to be. But I want to make sure that at least you guys aren't struggling to see the images or hear what we're saying. So I just want to make sure everybody is, the quality of the thing is coming up to snuff a little bit here. So if you're having issues with anything in tonight's, like quality-wise, like the backdrop or anything, let me know so I can, because I want to make it a wonderful kit modeling experience. And well, you know what? I just had a thought. I got the Honey and the Sherman. They're both 1/3. Well, actually, this is an Israeli M1. This is the Israeli Super Sherman. But still, I could probably build these two at the same time so we could do a comparison video. Over time.
No green screen on natural, please.
Yeah, the consensus seems to be no green screen.
Okay, well, I want to give it a shot. Try something different. But
says unless you're going to try to fly like Superman.
I have done some silly stuff with green screen. Had a lot of fun with it, but in the end, you can still tell. The cool thing, I think the most fun I've had with models is making videos with them, though, because I was just talking today with my sister about this. Like, if I had the money, and apparently commercial property prices are coming down, they still haven't recovered. So I was thinking, if money wasn't an issue, what I'd like to do is find some big empty warehouse, set it up inside where people would just come in, build their model. Half of it would be for model building and creative enterprises. Maybe have some sound booths for musicians or amateur musicians. And then have part of it dedicated to like video making and have them all work together. So, okay, the deal is you can come in here and use this facility for free. You can write your music, but I get to use it to make videos. And whatever models you build, they're going to go in a video. And, they're fighting Godzilla. I don't care what they are. Okay, let's play a stupid kit model nerd game. Something versus Godzilla. And I'm going to start off with Thunderbirds.
Which Thunderbirds? The
Jerry Anderson Thunderbirds.
Cats.
Thunderbirds, or go.
Or airplane, or cars.
No, the Thunderbirds, the puppets.
Jerry Anderson, Stingray, stand by for adventure. Anything could happen in the next half hour. I just hope nobody cuts my strings. It's anything versus Godzilla, so you got to fill in the blank. Herbie the Love Bug versus Godzilla. Squash one VW.
Max versus Godzilla.
We've been there, Ken, remember? I don't know. I don't think Godzilla could take Herbie the Love Bug because of plot armor. X-Wing. Oh, there you go. There we go. Gantor versus Enterprise. I've already done the Enterprise versus Godzilla. I think I actually have that meme in here somewhere. What does Godzilla need with a starship?
The Seaview versus Godzilla.
Why not? It's fought everything else.
Yeah.
Honey the Cat.
Hey, give Godzilla a fighting chance.
That was Chuck's idea.
Sam and Dean versus Godzilla from Supernatural.
Shaggy Buds brought up something earlier. He said if you shoot potassium into Godzilla, it would kill it because it couldn't absorb radiation. So now he's saying Godzilla versus potassium.
I thought it was cadmium. Whatever, one of them. One of those things.
Gumby versus Godzilla.
I am Gumby, damn it. Yeah, Gumby would wind up being chewing Gumby. Oh, come on, that was good. Let's see. Godzilla versus Godzilla. Oh, that at be gone so far. Christ, it can't defend itself against X-Wings.
They weren't X-Wings, they were speeders.
Oh, I was...
Anita Ekberg versus Godzilla. One bit okay.
How about a snake? How about a snake?
Godzilla against Gunnery Sergeant Hartman.
Oh, now you're cooking with gas. Let's see.
A-10. An A-10.
I think they already did that. It did not go well for the A-10s. No, those are F-15s.
Plan 9 versus Godzilla.
Chuck Norris?
Well, Godzilla's going to have his hands full of that.
COVID versus Godzilla.
Oh, God. The smallest... Well, that very, very War of the Worlds, the smallest thing... there it is. The smallest thing killing the biggest thing. And
Borg versus Godzilla. Now that's got possibilities.
What's that? The Borg? Oh yeah, the Borg. It sound like this. Planet of the Apes meets Godzilla. They'd be chew toys. They'd have to be one big bar of soap. The Teletubbies. I would pay money to watch Godzilla torch the Teletubbies. I'd pay money to watch him torch the Teletubbies. Ooh, but
Terminator. The Terminator.
Oh, Daleks. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think at this point the Max's Models live stream is officially over, and we're now into the after show. In fact, I think we have been for a few minutes. Guys,
for that. I've been waiting for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, the Max's Models live stream is now officially over. I apologize for running off an advanced critical mach theory. That was letting some of my pilot interest interfere with kit models. But I actually never will look at a model Spitfire the same way without thinking about it. You can almost pull the wings off at Mach 0.92, 11 Gs. I mean, that is impressive. I want to thank everybody coming out. At this point, we are now officially into the after show where we can talk about anything. Doesn't have to be models. Just keep it civil in the comments section. And I remember kids watch this show. So, Ken, I think you've had something you've been wanting to bring up. Is it sailboat time? Oh, I should not have said that. I thought he was already waiting to do that.
Well, I won't go into a huge part, but the boat is back in the United States. It came back Wednesday.
Power cell drained.
Dinner with the couple that owns it. It was very nice, very pleasant. Had some good stories to tell us. And I've set up the survey to occur on the Friday the 14th. If all things go well, hopefully by the end of this month, I'll have myself a boat.
Wow. And guys, we're talking about one he can live on.
Yeah, it's 39 feet long. If anybody cares, it's Catalina Model 380, built in the year 2000.
Godzilla versus John Holmes.
We just had to go there.
That might be interesting.
One monster fighting another.
Livestream, Max.
Now we're really turning into Max's models after hours.
By the way, if anybody happens to be interested in a pinball machine, I'm selling mine.
Yeah, he has the F-14 pinball machine by, what was the name of that company? It's not a Bally. It's a...
No, it's not Bally. Williams. Yeah, it's built in 1986. It's a really good machine. I've got it all fixed up.
Pinball machine won't fit on the boat.
Yeah, the pinball machine. Actually, I need to sell the pinball machine to buy the boat. So
Ken versus Gilligan.
Ken versus Gilligan?
Maybe we should start a GoFundMe for Ken to buy the boat.
I'll give y'all free rides. How's that sound?
You might be riding forever.
Just a single mast.
Was it 39-footer or the 42-footer? Which one are you seriously considering getting?
The 39-footer.
It has everything you want, right?
Yeah, this one's got everything on it that we need. It's pretty much turnkey. It's even got Starlink. Oh,
that sounds like the name of a science fiction movie, Starlink. Well,
Chuck, if you're serious, send an email to Max's Models, and I'll send the pictures back. I need a Jolly Roger for the boat.
a Jolly Kenny. Well, yeah,
I'm staying away from Jaws. I don't need a bigger boat.
Dun, dun,
And very
dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I'm pretty sure every time I walk into a Dunkin' Donuts, the donuts hear the opening theme to Jaws.
Never go to see anything smaller than a destroyer. Depends on what your goals are. I've heard that, Tom. The best 2 days in your life: the day you buy a boat, the day you sell it. For a lot of people, probably, yeah. The people who are selling me the boat are not thrilled about it. They decided they want to start a family, which doesn't fit too well on that size of a boat.
They just need a bigger boat.
I kind of think he's the one that's really into this. She's kind of, but she's happy to get a home and be on land for a while. So he's not happy about it. He told me, he said, "Hey, if you ever need crew, let me know. I'll be there." But when I get the boat, I'll give Max pictures, and he can put that in the start to the live stream if anybody's interested. Yeah, boat. Yeah, I've coined a new term. It's called a boat unit. Each boat unit's equivalent to $1,000. Yeah. Boats. Yeah, I know boats are expensive, but I've been wanting one of these for a very long time. and I do plan on spending a great deal of time on it. Actually, initially, after I get the boat and become comfortable with it, I'm planning on taking it to the Annapolis Boat Show in October in Maryland.
And you would be doing that because
humans are on the menu of all sea life.
we're just tasty victuals afloat.
Yes. Something wonderful about a sailboat moving with just the wind. Yeah, it's the kind of boat you can travel around the world and not burn a single gallon of gas.
Where's the fun in that?
I am not very, very rich. Trust me.
And trust me, Ken, after you're on a boat for a while, you'll be very, very even not richer.
Yeah.
But your money, you can, I mean, you only go around once, so, if that's what brings you joy, I'm all for it.
It's so quiet. It's like flying a glider. It's just the noise of the wind going by. It's very peaceful.
And the roar of the surf before you go aground.
Well, if you can hear the roar of the surf, maybe you won't go aground.
Thank you, Steve, for being Steve.
You know the difference. You know the difference between a pessimist and a realist.
What's the difference?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. I like that.
Remember, optimism can be crushed. Pessimism cannot. It can only be verified.
Yes, the boat does have solar panels and a wind generator. It also has a high output alternator.
Hey, wait a minute, Ken. I had baked beans with lunch. I'm a wind generator. Sorry, that was just low-hanging fruit. Couldn't let that one go. Too easy.
Well, when you're on the boat, I'll just point you toward the window, okay?
Best point me towards the sail. Hey, look, 12 knots.
That doesn't work, right? It's like trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Well, we don't know. We haven't tried it yet. So,
actually, that's where the term boot your computer came from.
Where?
Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. That's where the term came from.
I wonder why they called it bootstrap.
You say reboot?
Oh, hold on, guys. I found a picture of Ken's boat.
Oh, you got a picture of it?
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, cool.
Can't wait to see this.
Oh, you're not going to do something stupid, are you?
It's not stupid. It's funny.
I did send you a picture of the boat.
There it is.
You have to remember, guys, this thing's on like a 30-second lag loop, so,
No, that's not my boat.
It's a sailboat.
Yeah, barely go upwind.
Wait till I'm on it. Reference previous joke.
Says, well, we should buy an airplane.
I still have that. I still have that model up on the shelf on the Tarbis, and I gotta admit, there is nothing like a square rig sailing ship on the shelf just to add a little class to the joint. They really are elegant machines.
Also, the best kind of boat to be on is a friend's boat.
Yep. Three best, what's better known than a boat, a plane, or a pickup truck? Having a friend with a boat, a plane, and a pickup truck. Well, I thought we would have some scintillating conversation with the state of the nation, but we're boring everybody. We're down below 100 viewers. So.
Oh, wow. How'd that happen?
Well, we did in the official live stream. This is the after party.
Okay. Well,
the problem was I didn't start drinking till the end of the show. If I'd started drinking before the show, it might have been a little more entertaining.
HMS Surprise. Mutiny on the Bunny.
Okay, that was cute.
What's the name of the boat, Ken?
The name of the boat is going to be Deep Thought.
Okay. Oh, by the way, crowd asked about HMS Surprise.
Know where I am? My wife can just tell them.
He's in deep thought.
That's right.
This, by the way, to answer people's questions about this model, This thing's been repopped under a couple of different names, but originally it was a French frigate. I think it was like Lagrange or something like that. And then it got repopped as a couple of different things. I don't even remember which iteration this is. It might have been the pirate ship. But originally this was I believe this model was a French frigate. You know
Yes,
what?
Chuck got it. Chuck understands what I'm talking about.
What's that?
He said after Doug Adams. Yes. That was the name of the computer. That they asked, what is the meaning of the universe, life, and everything? And it said, it will take me 10,000 years to answer that question.
Wait a minute. I thought the meaning of life was 47.
That's the answer. Actually, it's 42.
42.
Yes, Hitchhiker's Guide.
And I didn't even read the book.
We got the wrong number.
Well, I told you I didn't read the book. Oh, that's being said.
The name of the boat should be Broken Bank.
Aha! That is good. I like that. By the way, that is currently being sold as the Lindbergh Jolly Roger. Okay. Time for a quick trip to Scalemates.
I saw a McLaren the other day at the gas station. Beautiful car. And had a license plate, a thing to go around the license plate. One of those, I don't know what you call it. Anyway, underneath it says, "My wallet is broken."
Yeah, well, at $1.4 million, yeah, you would be.
Okay. LaFleur.
Floating.
That was the original name of. It's now being sold as the Jolly Roger, i.e., sort of a pirate ship. But this kit was originally the LaFleur. Hold on, let me put the picture back up. Oh, I've got it up. I'm sorry. Let me save. Oops. Home, crop, file, save as.
Why is my boat number 73?
PT-73.
PT-73.
That was McHale's boat.
No, that was 52.
No, it wasn't. It was PT-73.
It was PT-73.
Really? You sure?
Ken, I watched
Yes.
that show every day after coming home from school. I saw it in reruns. Heck, if I give it a minute, I could probably remember the name of the other boat that was Lieutenant Elroy's.
I did 14 years of sea duty. Avoid boats. They eventually sink.
Well, not always. They might always
Actually,
sink your wallet.
73.
There it is, the Lindbergh Lafleur, French sailing
Yeah,
ship, and I think it's a
I'm
frigate.
gonna put 42 on the sail as the sail number.
Oh, and Nathan says apparently homemade submarines sink pretty good too.
Too soon.
Call it Flat Earth Finder.
There you go.
That's pretty interesting, yeah.
And transform.
I'm also going to be selling some train stuff too, if anybody's interested in that.
And a child.
Ken's having to get rid of all of his toys.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
It's just stuff, Ken. It's just stuff.
Yeah.
You sound like my wife when we moved and she was trying to get me to get rid of all the stuff I had.
It's just stuff. Yeah, irreplaceable stuff.
Exactly. Irreplaceable.
Oh, that's a thought. Everybody, comment section time. Most irreplaceable thing you lost or sold. Ken, Steve, most irreplaceable thing you lost or sold.
You cut out.
Most irreplaceable thing you lost or sold.
My Rolex.
Lose it or sold it?
What?
Lost it or sold it?
Sold it.
Don't sell your P-38, Ken.
I'm 79 Trans Am.
My pre-Series 80 1911 A1 with the checkered grips, with the checkered four-strap that Tom Sue modified for me. Ken, you've seen me ping steel with a pistol at 100 yards. All right?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, we both done
We've
that.
both done it with our pistols. Now, those were benched rested, but that 45 automatic, I could keep them on the paper at 50 yards. I mean, it was that was the nicest 45 I've ever owned. Ran out of money, had to sell it.
Lance says I can fly my RC airplanes off the boat. Becomes an aircraft carrier. I have thought about it. I will be flying a quadcopter with video.
Sold my
video
1969
shots.
Mach 1 for $1,250. You heretic. Heresy. H1 Kawasaki with Lester Mags, 84 Monte Carlo SS. Well, there was my 74 Spirit of America Nova. 1970 split bumper Camaro Beretta Italian made 380. Oh, that's a nice little pistol.
Jello airplane coins? What?
I don't know, but it's I'm interested.
What the heck are Jello airplane coins?
Well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. They're airplane coins made of Jello. Duh.
Would be safe around you.
Nah, no food is.
No, keeping the wife.
Well, my home could be burgled once.
Now, the wife is actually kind of interested in going. She's pretty much an adventurer like me.
Oh yeah, Ken, you live on the edge. Although I did tell Ken if he bought the one that was up in the Northeast, that it'd help him sail it down to Florida.
Or you could help me take the one from Florida up to Annapolis.
I won't rule it out, but Ken, I want to share some. I want to share something.
We could all do a live stream from the.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
What? What?
Do a live stream from the boat.
Possible. We might do one from Hurricane Hobbies next week if Ian if we can arrange it. But that's one reason I got the laptop. But there will be no cough medicine on that one because I have to drive home. One thing though, I was reading an article when Pirates of the Caribbean the movie came out, like a lot of people, I thought, okay, you know what? Let me back up a little bit. Ken told me, hey, let's go to see this movie, Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, when did that movie come out? It was before I was married, right? Yeah, it was. It was well before I was married, yeah. I was still flying at Mesa. And Ken says, let's go see this movie, Pirates of the Caribbean. And I guess you'd already moved to Jacksonville because we went and saw it. What kind of stupid movie is this? You know, Pirates of the Caribbean, really? You know, so we went and saw it. Of course, I love the movie. I was like, wow. As a result of watching that movie, I actually took fencing lessons. Fencing 1 and fencing 2. I wasn't any good at it, but I took it. That's why I really appreciate the part where he goes, how's your footwork? Because footwork, if you guys ever done any fencing, footwork is absolutely critical. Anyway, he got me interested, like a lot of people, in the old sailing vessels. And I started going on YouTube channels and Wikipedia and all that other stuff, reading about the old ships, learning different classes and types. And that's where I learned a lot of the jargon. I know what the futoks and futok shrouds are. And Ken and I toured the Bounty before she sank. By the way, I found that video recently. I think I reposted it. And I got this fascination with the old square riggers. Probably one reason I built this model of the Jolly Roger, a.k.a. Le Fleur. Anyway, so I start finding out there's a brig up in the Great Lakes called the Niagara. And that's the one that's up in Erie, right? Is that the Niagara, the brig Niagara?
Niagara, yeah. Well, that's something.
Well, anyway,
Yeah,
it's a replica of the one that was it John Paul Jones, whoever's I have not yet begun to fight or whatever. Yeah.
The crash said Max's models on the road. Live stream from random Waffle Houses nationwide.
Well, I got to admit, I kind of like that idea.
That's not a bad idea.
It's actually not. But anyway, so I'm reading an article, a guy who went on one of the paid. Now, the way it works is you pay them to be part of the crew. Interesting situation. Labor paying to be there. But obviously people do it for a week. Well, basically you're sort of a passenger who does jobs or help earn their keep. You pay to go on it. You're on it for, like the minimum's like 5 days. And they, but they don't have you doing the dangerous stuff like climbing the rigging. But they still have plenty for you to do. They actually had one of those reality shows for a while that was taking place on an old square rig ship, and you had to live like the old sailors.
It was called The Ship.
Called The Ship. And I love the comment the guy made, this ain't no pleasure cruise, baby. Anyway, I'm reading, and this is one of the coolest things I've ever read. I'm reading the adventures that one of the guys had who took it all the way down to Florida. Now, he happened to be out on deck at night off the coast of, I think they were south of Daytona. And the shuttle was going up. The Shuttle Transportation System, the STS. And they watched it launch from the deck of a square rig ship on a clear night. At night. And he opined about, I'm watching man's most sophisticated and advanced vehicle launch into space while standing on the deck of one of humanity's most primitive forms of travel. And something about that just reached out and tapped me on my soul. I thought that was the coolest freaking thing. So, Ken, if we're going to do this, I want to be out at night when Elon's popping off one of his return to mission rockets.
They do it all the time.
That should make it easier. I can't think of anything that would be cooler and more awesome to be sitting on the bow of a sailing vessel watching a rocket go into space and then come back
and watch it land. Yes, that would be majorly cool.
I have fun on my. It's still on my phone. I have video. I was over South Carolina and my FO goes, "What's that?" This is when I stole on the 190. He goes, "What's that?" And I grab my phone and I go, "Dude, that's a rocket." And it was just after sunset. There was even, I think, still a hint of blue on the horizon. You could see, it was made for television. And we saw it staged, and you saw the gas and everything. And we've been coming back, and the FO's going, "What was that?" And I look out there, and you see the rockets coming back. I've seen that a couple of times. Usually I've got to crane my neck because, it's over behind us or something. But I was like, holy, and you see the staging fire. They don't fire and just keep firing. They fire in bursts. And I was like, are those meteors? There can't be two of them because dude, that's Elon. Those are rockets coming back. It's like, holy smokes. Say what you want. I don't care what you think about the guy. He's changing the world we live in. If there is a real life Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll definitely do that, Max. That would be really impressive to sit out there and watch the rockets fly over us and then come back.
I don't know if you guys ever watch a YouTuber named Bill Whittle, but he used to be with PJTV, and now he's at the right angle on BillWhittle.com. He basically makes his living on YouTube, and he's a couple of years older than I am. And he lived in the Bahamas when Apollo 11 went off. And you guys may remember Apollo 11 got delayed on the launch. He, as a kid, lived in the Bahamas and a big space geek. And he actually, when he came to Miami, he actually worked with Jack Horkheimer in the Stargazer at the Miami Planetarium. But anyway, and I didn't realize Horkheimer was wearing a toupee the whole time. Anyway, he talked about how he waited out for it to go because he wanted to see it go overhead. And finally, it was delayed. He figured, okay, they're going to scrub the launch, and he went to bed. Then about an hour later, his mom woke him up and said, Bill, they launched. And he freaked out. He ran outside and the reason that he was so disappointed, this once in a lifetime opportunity, was the Bahamas where he lived was where you would have seen it stage.
Ooh.
And he missed it. To this, he was talking about that on the Stratosphere Lounge's live stream, and he's like, to this day, I still don't forgive myself for that. Dude, I get it. You were like 11 years old, but man, that just effing sucks.
Gee, I might even fly down for that.
Oh, I would in a heartbeat.
You'll join us, Steve?
I might. That's pretty interesting.
I had the pleasure of taking two of my nephews, technically my wife's nephews, and their grandfather, Senor Manuel, who is now about 97 years old and going strong. And I took them...
Get some blood from them.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I took them down to Jetty Park. And if you guys happen to watch my cruise video, my wife and I took that cruise recently, when we're leaving, we go out right past Jetty Park, down by...
Max Garfield says to tell you that he sent you a picture.
Oh, well, let me run and check that out real quick. Anyway, we got to see a Delta II take off. We're out at Jetty Park because there was going to be a liftoff. And I had, the space. If you guys don't know, there is a phone number you could call and listen to mission control during a space launch. In fact, for those of you who are the hardcore who are still here, I've got it in my speed dial. Let me just see what that number is real quick.
How about if you take that picture down so we can see you?
Well, I put the picture up so you didn't have to see me, Ken. For all you know, I'm naked.
Oh, please. I don't want that in my head tonight.
Oh, please, by all means, keep it up.
I knew that would do the trick. No, guys, I can assure you I am most definitely properly attired. Okay, Garfield just sent me a picture. These are the Jello coins he was talking about. Let me put these up here. Image. Okay, and there they are. That is awesome. Garfield has the coolest stuff. You'll see in about 30 seconds.
We're still waiting.
Yeah, you'll see in about 30 seconds.
When I was looking, they had a kit on the saucer for Plan 9 from outer space.
Okay, guys, Space Mission Control has a phone number that you can call and listen into during the launches. For those who want it, the area code is 321. Ha! 321. Okay, that's cool. 867-1220. That is Space Mission Control. And I don't know if it's on all the time, but during the launches, you can actually hear the controllers, what's going on in Mission Control. And thank you, Garfield.
Hey.
Those are airplane coins.
Hey, Paul, we're into the Max's live stream after hours, in case you're wondering.
Ken, if you want a super quick email a picture of your boat, I'll put it up. Not a cough medicine.
I have it on my phone. I'd have to text it to you.
Never mind. It has to go to email for me to blah blah blah. Guys, it's a 39-foot sailing boat. You know what they look like. You know what? Let me expand this.
One, you've seen them all.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Let's see. What do we have here? We have the Gotha. On his coins, we have the Gotha. I think that's an 0400. I can't really read these. It's a little too small. Well, you know what? Let's just zoom in bigger then. Okay, the Gotha. The V1400? 1500? The SM-76, the 3-engine Italian plate. I think it was surprisingly fast despite its appearance. The string bag, the swordfish. What is that, a walrus? Or supermarine? Is that a... I can't read the name there, but then we got the Stuka, the B-17, the Ju-88, the Betty, all the classics, the Wellington, the Liberator, the Mitchell, the Mosquito, the Mossy, the Lancaster, the Super Fortress that my dad worked on. You know, it's funny, I talk about my dad working on Super Fortresses. They were WB-29s, weather versions, during the Korean War, but it's just hard to believe that this thing we see in historical context, my dad actually worked on those things. I mean, it's we have more of a connection with the past than we often realize. The Neptune, the PV-2, the Stratojet, one of the most important jets ever. To this day, Stratojet technology affects our lives. If you ride on an airliner, if you love someone who does, you can thank the B-47. It's where the potted engines came from. The engines hanging out on pods. The
Canberra.
yeah, that's Soviet bomber. I think that's the 104. Canberra, B-52, Vulcan, sexiest, coolest looking British bomber ever. Vulcan and a Lancaster, two of the coolest looking airplanes in history. I mean, it's literally James Bond cool. The Hustler, the most amazing plane in history, or one of them, Convair. I can't stop and decide if those Convair engineers were certifiable geniuses or certifiable lunatics. The Argus, a underrated, forgotten aircraft, and of course the XV-70, Valkyrie, the sexiest six-engine jet ever. Well, I don't know. The B-47's pretty sexy too. It's kind of like, do you have fantasies about middle-aged girls or, super hot cheerleaders? Did I just say that out loud?
I vote for cheerleaders.
Then you're a Valkyrie kind of guy. If you prefer to, the middle-aged gals and, the Stratojet's your machine. I don't know. They're both sleek and sexy. Although the Valkyrie does look like it's wearing a dress. Again, did I just say that out loud?
Okay. Yes, you did.
Wow, for those of you who are still on board, you're getting the full maxi. Well, that probably shouldn't have any more cough medicine then, before I start saying stuff that'll be held against me in the afterlife.
I think this was from a 200-coin set.
Barney versus Godzilla. Again, like the Teletubbies, I would pay money to see Godzilla crush Barney. Yeah, Paul, that's why I was making the joke about the Vulcan being, James Bond cool, because it was in a James Bond movie. I remember the first time I saw Thunderball, when the guy puts the cyanide capsule or whatever it is in the pressurization system to poison the crew. And I was like 12 years old when I saw that. I was like, what a jerk. When they cut his oxygen, I was like, it serves him right.
What was the best part of Thunderball?
I think that mock-up, that full-size mock-up they made, still down there. I think it's a popular dive site, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, Ian Fleming, who did serve in naval intelligence during the war, World War II, Ian Fleming, lived most of his life down there in Jamaica. So a lot of the Bond flicks took place. What?
In Goldeneye.
Is that where he lived?
Yeah, that was the name of his little, compound.
Oh, okay. Well, he a lot of the James Bond movies took place down there in similar areas, and a lot of people don't know this, but one of the airports in Jamaica, I didn't know this. We have a database in the flight management system, and when we fly over airports, if I put the airport selection up, it'll show the identifiers of all the nearby airports and where they're located up on my moving map. And I saw I guess we're going out of Kingston, but we were heading northbound over Jamaica, about to go feet wet over the Carib, and I saw this runway down there. I went, wow, that's a big runway. What is it? So I looked on my moving map, zoomed it in, and it had an identifier, and I typed it in. It said Ian Fleming Field. So one of the airports, probably not far from where he used to live, is named in his honor in Jamaica.
Nice. And what was the best part of Thunderbolt besides the DB5?
Would that be I can never remember her name.
Fiona Volpe.
Yeah, there you go, Fiona Volpe. Played by? Portrayed by?
Barry says
Luciana Paluzzi.
There you go.
hey Max.
I still liked her in the green slime better.
Max.
Huh? What?
Barry said to tell me that
I'm awake.
he sent you 3 pictures in a text message.
Oh, in a text? It's easier to email me, but... Oh, by the way, guys, Neutral Zone Studios is about an hour north of Jacksonville, and Barry sent me some stuff. They have a fan appreciation weekend. They have mock-up sets of all the original Star Trek original series Enterprise sets, and...
Cool.
Oh my god! Oh my god, I have to share these. Jesus, Barry. That is... Oh! Oh, hold on. Hold on, that's my brother. Hang on. I'm going to try and Steven it. You guys are probably going to be blanked out for a second. Merge with active call. And merge. This is my younger brother, the one that dropped the Sheridan in Panama. Hey, Steven.
Yeah.
Hey, I got you on with Steve Manoia and Ken. What's up? You watching the live stream?
Well, all other forms of communication were out, so yes.
In other words, he was really
Hey,
bored.
hold on. Hold on. Before we get into anything, Steven, can you relate your? Because I talked about it earlier in the show. Can you relate your Sheridan drop in Panama?
What about it?
Well, I was telling them that you had dropped one in Just Cause, and I think you dropped it by parachute. It wasn't a Lapes drop, right?
Yeah, you know why we dropped it?
Go ahead. I don't.
Just cause.
Just Cause. We did it just cause.
Well, we thought those 80-second guys needed something to ride in. But,
And now,
yeah, it was. It came in at. It was for a 141. It was a really heavy drop, the hardest one we'd ever made, the heaviest one we'd ever made. And I still remember the load master back there, who was an E8. And he was flipping through the -1, and I went to say something to him, and he was like, "Don't bother me now." Yeah, before.
shut up, Lieutenant. I'm busy doing real work.
Oh my God, we're gonna die, you know. And when we took off, when we taxied out to leave from Fort Bragg,
Is that Pope Air Force Base?
yeah, I think we left did we leave at a Bragg or Pope? Maybe we left at a Pope. Anyway,
Well, the Air Force Base is Pope. Yeah.
yeah, but we had it on there, and they had the thing packed with everything you could put on it. And I don't remember what the weight was, but it came in at like 45,000 pounds or something. We were getting at those little graphs on our weight charts, which kind of go into like the emergency war weight stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as we taxied out, I looked out and I remember all the ground crews were lined up with their equipment flashing the yellow lights. And it was like, oh my God, we're going to die.
I'm guessing it was their way of wishing you good luck, but it was also just in case we're ready for the crash.
Yeah, halfway down there, there were 5 parachutes and 8 crew members, and I walked up wearing a parachute.
Guys, if the crap hits the fan, you're on your own.
50 rounds of ammo. I thought, what is this, like suicide? But now when we took off, the aircraft commander was like, okay, you got one job now. You know what? Make sure we don't run to the plane in front of us. Got it.
Well, you were telling me that the crew had never flown a plane at that weight.
No, it was interesting. And we flew down there, and it was like aluminum sky heading south. You know, I mean, the U.S. Air Force was flying south for the winter, and there was only chatter on the radios. It was in Spanish. It was the Nicaraguan aircraft controllers thinking, "Oh my God, we're screwed," you know. And but it was really impressive. I mean, we everything turned out well, and we did our drop, and you know, I saw the Commandant ship burning and everything, and we dropped our tank. And you could always chatter on the radios, but you realize, you know that I'll joke about it. It looks like hell down there. Well, it was true, and but they had like a gazillion tankers and everything, and we had plenty of support. I mean, the Air Force owned the skies, so we did our mission and went on to Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, and we were done. But
So I'm kind of curious. After you dropped the tank, did the plane climb a little bit, or what
it
happened?
climbs a lot. We were hoping to get hooked up on the ass of the aircraft.
Yeah, there have been, by the way, I should point out, guys, that dropping like artillery pieces and stuff, there have been times like the barrel broke loose and wound up hooking on the rear of the airplane up in the cargo door. And the guys having to fly the plane with this dead weight hanging. So that is a real concern. Although Sheridan, thank God, has a short barrel gun.
Yeah. The best I can equate it to is, and I know it's a family channel, but a really, really good Constitution.
Well, at this point, we're in the after show, so you can you can say what you want, but
Well, the funniest thing was one of the aircraft couldn't, because our doors were open, our flaps were kind of whatever, for the drop, and one of the aircraft got his couldn't get his clamshell door shut, so we were stuck at a certain airspeed.
Mm-hmm.
And all I could think was, screw him.
Screw him, I have needs.
This is all about us. Like when those B-17s, one guy loses an engine, and I'll write your folks.
Sucks to be you, dude, but I got to think about the unit. Remember what General Savage said: when you go down to save your buddy, you deprive the unit of 10 guns.
Well, that was my attitude. And but anyway, it was definitely an adventure. And then, of course, being good air crews, we then recovered to Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, and complained about the totally unacceptable living quarters.
Welcome to the Air Force, gentlemen.
But and that's the way it was. I liked it, Yeah, but anyway, Max, I was listening to your. I trust you were not singing that famous song, "Ride of the Stratojet."
No.
I believe it's "Ride of the Valkyrie." Or, Stratojet, more like the Fatto Jet. But anyway, I knew this. Pilot in the Air Force. He was retired at the time. He'd been a pilot on C-133. You remember those?
The Globemasters.
Yeah. And I said,
the stretch C1, the John Holmes C-130.
The C-133, it was the size of a Starlifter. And they really built it for one reason, I think, was to fly those Minuteman missiles around.
Yeah. Ken, are you still with us?
Yep, still here.
Okay, I think Steve signed out.
What, can you hear me?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
the other Steve. He's been having connectivity
okay.
issues.
And I asked him, I said, are those the planes that used to blow up in midair? And he goes, well, not any more than your airplane those days.
Oh, Lord. Stephen, if you don't mind, could you kind of, because I had commented earlier based on something I think you told me, that after all the years of training for these obscure and difficult airdrops, you wound up flying the localizer. The actual combat airdrop you did was like the easiest one to navigate. Could you kind of talk through just what happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wasn't the lead pilot, so let's see, I think there were 8 elements. There were 4 elements of equipment and then 4 elements of personnel, and with, I think, 8 aircraft each.
Uh-huh.
So what is that? 32 and then 32?
Mm-hmm.
And out of deference to the Army, we tend to drop the equipment before we drop the personnel.
Well, sure, so I didn't land on them.
Yeah.
Just make sure you don't drop it on top of them, right?
Yeah, right. Well, there's more Army guys. But anyway,
He ain't wrong.
worse yet, we stuck our squadron logo sticker on the side of the Sheridan. So, man, this better be right on point. This is going to be kind of embarrassing this on the news. But no, so you drop the equipment, and then you drop the personnel, and Tucumán Vitilia, I think, was our. Well, it was the main airport in Panama. There were a couple of different jobs. Riajada, that's where the C-130s got chewed up a little bit, and they lost a couple of guys.
Yeah, the word we heard was they pegged the first guy out the door because some Panamanian was running up down the runway with a 50 cal on an M113 shooting at anything he heard, and he got lucky.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah,
but they made him pay for it. I think they brought in a Spectre that took care of him.
Yeah, the Spectres expended a copious amount of ammunition, from what I understand, and of course there was all kinds of weird stuff that went on. I don't know a lot of the details that was going on the ground, but there was a lot of stuff going on, that's for sure. My wife worked with a couple of guys that had been on the ground when that thing happened, which they're very humorous and not anything I can get on to in a family channel. But
we're in the after show. It's okay.
Oh well, look, the military guys we had down there in Panama, Max, that was like they were just hanging out doing the normal thing in Panama. Hey, let's go out and get drunk, have a party. All of a sudden, man, what the hell's going on? Stop letting you brief us on this stuff. I'm about to score here, Invasion, yeah, I'm the invasion, baby. Come on, beat him. Come back to the room, But anyway, it's like, hey, this shit looks real. But anyway,
man, this is one very detailed exercise.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyhow, but I was watching your list there of aircraft, and needless to say, and I was thinking about this the other day. I think without question the sexiest aircraft in history is the Valkyrie.
It's hard to beat.
I mean, you don't top the B-70. You remember that quote I sent you from Marceau Dassault? For an aircraft to be great, it must look great,
Well,
fly well, it must look great, right?
When I see the XB-70, all I see are the girls from the Hammer movies with their dresses on.
If that quote is true, that explains the Airbus.
The Airbus is a very apropos named aircraft. That's what it is. It looks the role. It's the dowdy old lady that you can rely on. It's like being spanked by a middle-aged woman. It's not something you brag to your friends about, but you still enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
Did I just say that out
loud?
I was
taking notes. Go ahead. Well, I kind of like the Rainbow. Jay Leno's whole routine.
Hold on. You talking about the Rainbow, the from Republic, the 4-engine?
Yeah. What kind of?
Okay, that is like
airplane?
my buddy Mike Machat's favorite airplane on Earth. He loves the Rainbow, and I can't blame him. The Rainbow was RB-12 or something. I forget. But the Rainbow was
11
or RB-11. You think about it.
12, I don't know.
First off, it's the Rainbow, the one that Mike's talked about in several of his videos. It's a Republic. It was a post-war. It was supposed to be a reconnaissance plane. But the thing about the Rainbow, one of the many things about the Rainbow that I find intriguing. First off, it has such an Art Deco look to it. Okay. It is still to this day, the fastest 4-engine, piston engine airplane ever made. It is a weird mix of the future and the past. It has long, square-tipped wings, yet it has a rounded tail fin. It has that pointed nose with no step for the cockpit, like a Heinkel 111. It's all or B.
That sounds like the thing Howard Hughes crashed.
No, that was the XF-11.
No. Next to it.
Yeah, but now the thing Hughes crashed, the XF-11. Was also a reconnaissance plane, ironically, but the Rainbow was a 4-engine recon plane and potentially bomber. But it also not only did it have a very advanced array of cameras inside, but it had a dark room in the airplane, so they could develop the film. So when they landed, they didn't have to run off with the film; they could give them the prints. It was very much ahead of its time in a lot of ways. It was sort of the pinnacle of piston engine aircraft at a time when piston engines were very close to being replaced. And they did talk about Pan Am, and others talked about making an airliner out of it. It was just too expensive to operate. and with a narrow fuselage, it would have carried a lot of people, and the speed just wasn't enough to justify it. But technology-wise, it was a masterpiece of advanced technology. And
Do you have a picture of it, Max?
okay, let me go get one real quick.
Yeah, it's a really, really sexy airplane.
My brother won't be happy till he's nursing a sick Vickers Viscount. But anyway,
I know there's an
The
old.
sad thing is
I know there's an old Dakota. I've flown it myself.
Yeah,
don't you
sure.
know?
Max misses the days like I'm in an Airbus, but I miss the days of the Super Constellation. The main of the DC-6 at least.
Who doesn't love the Connie?
Yeah. Now, what's the difference with the Connie and the Super Connie?
Okay, primarily engines, wing, and fuselage length.
They're both pressurized, though, I assume.
Yeah, I think all the Constellations were that.
Now, the DC-4 was not pressurized, and the 6 was.
Correct. 6, 7 were.
Yeah. Okay. Now, during the Berlin airlift, did they have any 6s or only 4s?
I think that was all 4s.
No. Okay.
Okay, hang on just a second here. I'll put a picture of the rainbow up. Plus.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a kid, I used to think, how did the Berlin airlift win? Why didn't the Russians just shoot the planes down? I thought because it would have been active war.
That is correct. Also, they did ram one of them.
They blocked the roads and the trains because that was passive resistance. Shooting
Also,
on a U.S. Air Force aircraft would have been
that would have been an active war. Okay, there's a picture of the rainbow.
By
the way,
that's why it worked.
you guys will see the. The Russians
did have some kind of air maneuvers where they blocked the typical flight path and they had to go around. So
but they could not intrude. Here's the deal: if the guys got out of the
Max, did y'all ever fly in Tippelhoff back when they had an old approach, like between the apartments and the laundry hanging out to dry?
Dude, I went to Germany as a tourist. Here's a picture of the rainbow.
In '89, I flew into Germany.
XF-12.
Back when they had the old approach to Tippelhoff, and that was not a joke. You were right between the apartment buildings.
Oh, but that's any approach. That's the GPS approach into LaGuardia.
Yeah, but they're New Yorkers.
Yeah, they're used to it.
So what do you think, Steve?
Oh, that airplane? Wait a minute. It looks like a 4-inch B-26, but longer.
But that is that's XF-12.
Funky looking air. What is that? 1944,
45, yeah.
It was designed in 44, but they actually flew it in 47.
It looks relatively fast.
Oh, it's fast. Like Max said, it's the fastest 4-engine piston aircraft ever.
I have an email from Bill Campbell saying that he's apologizing for missing the live stream. He's not watching right now, and I'm just going to type a message back to him. Okay, I am forgiving you online in real time. Stick a smiley face on there. Smiley face.
I see you got it looks like a flying box up there. What was that crappy one they made before, the Packlet?
C-82.
Packard?
Yeah, Packlet, the C-82.
C-92 or something?
82, C-82. C-82. That's the one from Flight of the Phoenix.
Oh, that wasn't 119?
No, the 119 was the one they did right. Fairchild had this policy of make a really screwed up plane, then fix it and make a good airplane out of it.
Right. Well, of course, remember that the engine they put on was out of a T6 because that actual engine would have ripped that thing apart. They built for Flight of the Phoenix.
Yeah, and it still wound up killing the pilot, Paul Mance.
Well, but that wasn't the engine.
No, that was actually bumped into the ground. Ken, I'm putting up the picture of your boat, by the way.
And that was actually a reshoot too, wasn't it?
No, it was what's called insurance shoots. They had everything they needed in the can, but they shoot it a couple more times in case it's out of focus or something. And he was doing the insurance shots when he bumped that little rise in the ground. It's actually sadly, I mean, it's on YouTube now. I hate to see that they're and it cracked apart in two places.
Tallman die some years later, like in a.
He was flying. Actually, Tallman was flying. Yeah, he was flying an Aztec back from a shoot and went into the mountains. But a lot of people think that he probably, because he was in his 70s by that point, they think Tallman probably had a heart attack or a medical condition or something, you know, and because he was just too good a pilot for that to just happen. And
well, how did Art Skull die?
He was doing background He was doing background footage for Top Gun, and he was in his pits and he had a camera out on it, and he was doing it for the spin where Maverick gets in the spin, and he they heard a radio
boat behind the raft.
Well, they heard a radio transmission. I've got a problem here, and they think he may have had a control failure. You know, like maybe one of the cables broke or something. And he hit the water. They never recovered him or the body. Tallman was making a routine ferry flight in an Aztec from Santa Monica to Phoenix, VFR. But he did go into bad weather, and he may have been trying to scud run because he was only 58 years old. And it's distinctly possible he was scud running and went into the terrain, which is not, you know, inconceivable. And he might have had a medical. I don't know. He'd lost a leg earlier because of that go-kart accident and everything, and the guilt he had over Paul Mantz. So it's hard to say, but part of me, I hate to say this because I have so much respect for the guy, but he's a human. People made mistakes, and it's distinctly possible that he was just scud running and got into a situation beyond his. You know, I hate to say this, but a lot of these guys that are great, you know, test pilots and stunt pilots, and please bear in mind, I am saying this with great deference and respect, but sometimes they are the worst freaking instrument pilots because they're used to going up when they can use the cameras in good weather, and you get them on an instrument, it's just not their strength.
You remember that story we read years ago in Air Progress about Fish Salmon?
Yeah, Fish Salmon, flying a freaking Connie.
A sick nurse in a sick Super Connie. His son, I think his name was Scooter, was in the plane with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he, you know, what the title of that article, I remember it was over 40 years ago. You remember the title of the article?
Fish Salmon Goes West?
Requiem for a Silent Birdman.
Ah.
And Fish Salmon got her soul died. His son survived. You know?
Yeah, I think they coughed a motor or something. And,
yeah. Problems or something.
Well, the famous ball player, you know, baseball's been very good to me. Killed going out of, I think, Puerto Rico to fly relief missions to Central America, to his home country. And that was, I actually read that article recently. That was really sad. They had a DC, I don't want to say it was a DC-6 or DC-7 full of relief supplies going to Central America, where he was from.
What's the difference between the 6 and the 7?
A lot, actually. The 7 was had different engines, a little longer, and it had, if I'm not mistaken, it had the engines, the very problematic. Oh God, I don't remember. I can never remember the numbers of these engines, but it was the one like the later Connies had with the power, with those power return turbines. But the airplane had a lot of mechanical problems, and they were trying to get it fixed. And the reason the ball player was there to begin... Oh, God, come on. He was super famous. What's his name? Roberto Clemente. Thank you. The reason Clemente was on board was there'd been a big earthquake in his home country. He was flying supplies down there. But he learned that a lot of the supplies were being confiscated by the government and kept by the police and military. So he figured, given his super high profile as a world famous ball player, if he went down in person, it would keep it from being basically thefted by the government. But the airplane was having some issues mechanically. It was a tired, I forget it was a, hold on, I'll check it out. But it was a 6 or 7. It might have been a 7. But he figured, I'm going to go down there and keep these guys from stealing all this stuff because they're not going to screw with me. I'm Roberto Clemente. Well, it's a DC-7. It was in '72, and and they actually got a very qualified pilot to fly it. The guy had a lot of time on sevens and had been an airline pilot. He was very properly trained. And going out of Isla Verde Airport, which is ironically right next to the current day Puerto Rico airport. Isla Verde's still open, but it's a small short. Anyway, I think they smoked a motor on takeoff. The captain was trying. It was heavily loaded. He was trying to get it back, and they might have crapped the second engine. They just didn't make it back. It was a real tragedy. Clemente was killed, but it was just one of those things. Those old prop jobs do not operate on a surplus of power like modern day jets do, which is why modern day jets only have two engines.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's we learn. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us.
Mm.
We wonder why our aircraft are so good today, because they realized that 50 years ago, we got some problems with our technology. We better make it better.
Yeah, those are the right 3350, 988 TC, 18EA 1-2, 18 cylinder turbo compound air cooled radial piston engines.
We can sit there and talk about, man, don't you miss 1958 aviation? Would you have gotten on the airliner in 1958? Yes, I'd have gone right for the cocktail lounge.
Yeah, there was there is a.
I'm not going to feel it.
There is a series of YouTube videos called "Living the Dream," which I recommend everybody watch. Clearly made
I've
by.
seen something about what it was like flying like back then.
Yeah.
Swelling and be drunk. So
And these guys, they're little Lego movies, and they're first off they're extremely accurate, and they're also funny as heck.
Yeah.
But anyway, they ran out of stuff to do, so they did one where the two little Lego characters go back in time through a vortex, and they go, "Oh my God, it's 1957, the heyday of the golden era of airlines," and they look up on the board. It's been 19 days without an accident. But anyway, and they're going out in the airplane.
That's all right, Max. That's all right. They'll always make more Americans.
Yeah. Well, look, if we're going to continue this nonsense, then I need to get more.
Everybody who's on this program has been in a plane crash, raise your hand. I'm last my hand up.
Steve, why don't you tell them about that, Steve? It's my brother Stephen here was in actually a pretty serious plane crash of a Citabria. I have to get more cough medicine if we're going to keep this going, so I'll be back in a second. Stephen, tell them the story.
Well, my loyal friend broke my fall.
I'm just going to leave the empty chair facing the camera, and yes, people, I'm wearing shorts.
Wait, okay, let me get Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine. It is May 31st, 1991, and I'm on leave from the Air Force. A dashing Air Force officer, I must say. And me and a buddy decided to fly down from Quincy to Bluntstown, about 35 miles away, to have some lunch. He owned a Blanca Citabria. And we got on the airplane. He did his pre-flight and everything. We got in the plane, and everything was fine. And we took off, and I was in the back seat. He was in the front. And we had gotten maybe 1,000 feet up. And all of a sudden, the plane kind of shook a little bit. And we had these headsets on. And he said, "This airplane ain't flying right." And I suddenly saw the prop stop. And I went,
there's a clue.
Yeah, really. He said, "This airplane ain't flying right. I'm turning back, I think." So he started to turn back, and that's when the prop slowed and then stopped. I went, interesting. So at that point, you're in that situation where you're out of airspeed and ideas.
At the same time, and altitude.
And altitude. And so he turned back and tried to make this back to the airport, and we came pretty close, but the soybean field came up first. And I remember this distinct vision of a giant pine tree right in front of me. And he must have turned to avoid it, and we slammed into the dirt. And next thing I knew, it was raining inside the airplane. Why do you think it was raining?
Fuel?
Yep.
Ooh, that'll motivate you.
Yeah, funny thing about gasoline, it feels cool when it first hits you, and then it
And it
runs down your
stinks.
back, and then it runs down your back and into other places I won't go into, but then it starts to burn. And I was like, well, this is not good. I mean, we stand hard, and his head was all cocked over to the side. I thought he was dead.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought, oh, this is bad. And I looked down, and my back was hurting me real bad. And I looked down, and I thought, all I want to know is, can I move my feet? And I moved my feet, and they moved, and I went, yes, I'm out of here. I'm unbuckling, shaking myself. And I go crawling out of the wreckage, which caused the gears are folded up and everything. And so the wings broken down, hanging. So you kind of crawl out from under the wing, spitting fuel out of my mouth. And I thought to myself, if I stand up, I'll be okay, which wasn't like the A answer. And I stood up and went, yeah, okay, I'm pretty delirious. I'm going to sit back on the ground here. I'm better here. And I heard some voices, and John Cody, of blessed memory, and others showed up, and they were like, pretty quickly, they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, I don't remember what I said, but then we called the ambulance, help's on the way. And I was like, yeah, check my friend. I tried to pull him out a little bit, but I couldn't really move him any, which was just as well, because he had been his legs had been very severely injured. And I was still kind of like, gasping for air and stuff. And I mean, well, not that bad. I could breathe okay, but I was hurting in my head. I was hurting in my back. I didn't know what was wrong with me.
You'd just been in a plane crash. That's what was wrong with you.
Well, yeah. Well, then a few minutes, that's when, like I said, a couple of people showed up and said, I remember this. I didn't know who they were, but they said, are you okay? I go, yeah, I'm okay. How's my friend? Oh, he didn't look too good. and then I heard John Cody's voice, Max. As I say, John Cody of blessed memory. And there was a hardy aviator. But, he was like, yeah, you're going to be okay, Stephen. And then it was a little while past later. And then, of course, Max, I heard, God bless his soul, rest his soul, Bill Henry's voice. And I think Henry's on it. He's like, pick her up, Steve. And I heard these helicopter blades, womp, 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 and it was Life Flight coming to lift Blaine up. And I got the ride out in the ambulance because I wasn't nearly as badly hurt. But I mean, it was bad, but for me, it was bad, but it was kind of funny because, it was kind of like, the ambulance guys showed up and they were going, yeah, you're okay. You don't look too bad. And I'm going, well, how come my butt's burning?
Because it's full of gasoline.
And I'm hopping around going, there's gas in my ass, And they start irrigating me with the little saline box to get the gas out. It was true. I was literally hopping around going, there's gas in my ass.
Well,
and it was
And you're not passing wind.
but they
if he'd farted at that point, he would have exploded.
yeah, they call it irrigating me. So they were irrigating me.
Irrigation.
I had to drop my pants, and there were other people there, but they put like a towel around me, and I was like going, okay, that'll work. And they were irrigating me with their saline bottles. And then they said, yeah, I got fuel in my hair, I got fuel down my back, and everything else. And then the real nightmare began. They took me to the ER in Quincy, and I was like, oh my God, Quincy Memorial Hospital. It's like the Roach Motel. People check in, but they don't check out.
And where everybody knows my name.
Yeah, they took me there. They shoved an IV in each arm, and then they put in a catheter. It's a family channel. I won't say where.
We kind of got an idea.
It was sensitive, and then they put an NG tube down my throat, and I started aspirating because of the NG tube. It was like trying to chug a garden hose. And they pulled the NG tube out, and all I could think was, guys, you missed one.
You should have told him, guys, why are you putting that tube down me? Clearly I can breathe.
Why are they doing that?
I told him to check for blood and my stuff. Like I said, I told him, I said, since I just peeked everything out, there's no blood, so I'm okay. And ironically, Max, the paramedic doing it was Brian Dunmeyer, who I'd taken first aid from about 8 years earlier.
Brian Dunmeyer had been, at TCC as an instructor?
Yeah, he was a paramedic, yeah.
And the thing is what makes this worse about happening in your hometown is everybody freaking knows you.
Oh, yeah. And, for your next video, I'll send you some of the pictures, that our loving brother Bill took of me getting in the hospital.
My favorite one is them putting you in the ambulance, and you had the clarity of mind to flip him off.
Oh, damn right.
Tom Fox says no good. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you.
No, I was going to say, come closer, Bill, sir. My dial, my hands are on your throat.
Well, Tom Fox says no good story ever started with catheter.
And you thought Hammer films were horror.
I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, a few years later, I tried to take Steven up for a ride in a small plane, and I might as well have tried to move the pyramids.
Yeah, it was some years before I did that again. But so they took me to the I had a minor compression fracture to vertebrae.
You got denipped.
And I had a cut on my head, and they did a CT scan on me, but I was okay. It was so funny. I'm in the yard. The doctor's going. He goes, "You got this." See, I thought I had the internal injuries because I was spitting blood up, but actually I had a split on my forehead, which was bleeding into my lips, and that's what I was spitting up. But I didn't know that at the time. And the doctor goes, "Yeah, you got to cover your head, but you're okay." He goes, "I'm going to stitch this up." He goes, "You want a painkiller?" And I'm like, "I don't know, do I?" And he's looking at me like, "What are you, a wuss?" And I'm like, he goes, "Well, usually people don't take one for this." Okay, why don't you sip a nice Bud Light?
Back when that actually didn't have the stigma it has today.
That's not what he said. I'm a writer embellishment. But anyway, I said, I'm like, hell no, man. Stitch something up. Oh, God, I said, no, stitch something up. I'm a man, He stitched it up. It was like...
Steven, don't pretend to be a man. You're an Air Force officer.
Damn right. What am I, a Marine? Give me some antibiotic. But,
I want it all. Send me to La La Land and wake me up when I'm well.
So they have me in intermediate care like the next day, and I stink because I stink of fuel. Okay, and they wash you off. They did somewhat, but it's fuel. When you get on your fingers, you can't get the stuff off. So I'm sitting there, but I was okay. I was comfortable, and I had to go to the bathroom. They gave me a bedpan. I'm like, well, screw that. I'm hobbling over to the John, and I'm sitting there, Max. And what am I watching on television? Was it Cary Grant? That was a movie Test Pilot with Fred McMurray.
Mm-hmm. And Errol Flynn.
Yeah. Errol Flynn, yeah. That's on TV. Test Pilot.
And they're having every 30 minutes, one of them's getting killed in a crash. By the way.
They're going, yeah, that's just about right. Mags, you think 3D film is bad?
So, by the way, guys, when this happened, I heard about it. I was instructing over at Shields Aviation. All the instructors, like a dozen of them, lined up for a photograph, like a get well photo to help me, and they all wanted to be in it because they were like, fellow aviator, that kind of thing. And I went to Tallahassee, just 2.5 hour drive away from where I was based, and I went and saw they'd moved the wreckage into a hangar, and one of Quincy's many open hangars. And I'd already visited Steven in the hospital, so, he was actually, you're actually able to get up and walk and take a whiz on your own, so, I knew you were going to survive. But I saw the gash on your forehead, and when I went and looked at the wreckage of the airplane, that gash was caused by the overhead microphone hook, because I saw blood and a piece of meat in it. And, of course... My first inclination was to scrape it off, put it on a piece of paper, and bring it back to you. Here's the rest of your head. Here, glue this to your scalp. But I just left it, and I was like, I'll let the bugs eat it. But
now let me tell you the rest of the story for your viewers. My brother goes, well, I'm sorry about your crash, but I was instructing a guy yesterday, and what'd you do, Max? Well, let's just say I backed my seat up a couple of notches.
Yeah.
Click, click, click. Okay, go ahead.
By the way, in addition to the chunk of human detritus left on the overhead microphone hook, which, by the way, is a round, it's not a hook like a fish hook. It's a round thing the microphone just sets on, but when you hit it at 20 Gs, it'll take skin off. I also noticed you had that big bruise on your left arm. And I saw on the left, I remember, because I remember seeing on the left side where the throttle and mixture are in the wall, they were both bent down flush. You managed to bend steel basically 180 degrees in a millisecond.
Well, and Blaine had caved in the dashboard
with his head. With his head.
It fell off.
I saw the dent. By the way, it still had the blood on it. Not like a lot, but
Max, tell us what happened to the engine of the airplane, where it ended up.
Where his legs were.
No, later on with Henry's airplane.
Oh, hold on, guys. Not only the engine, but the airplane. Now, this happened a couple of years later. The engine, you have to understand something. People who build home-built airplanes, when they buy a kit, they get the airframe, and the two things they don't get are the engine and the prop. Now, with some planes you do. A lot of companies, you have to go get your own engine. And airplane engines are in big demand. That engine ended up being bought by somebody from the insurance company and a home built, and was Donovan wound up buying the home built, right?
I think so, yeah. That engine wound up.
And because he told me, by the way, man. And by the way, Donovan is the guy I bought the Mustang from, dear friend of both of ours. He kind of adopted us as his second and third sons, and he's like, by the way, the engine on my home built, my KR2 or whatever it was, that's the one from your buddy, from your friend's buddy that crashed the Satab. And I was like, holy crap, you're flying. The engine wasn't the problem, it was the fuel system. That's the dirt daubers that gobbed it up. But I was like, we're in a small town, so stuff kind of circulates within all the people who live there.
Yeah, but the creepiest part of that story is, yes, a dirt dauber built the nest, which damn near killed me and Blaine. And 25 years earlier,
Bill Cannell.
Story of Bill Cannell and how he died.
Okay. I had been in this airplane.
Our father's friend, Bill
Our
Cannell.
dad's best friend, Bill Cannell. Great guy.
Talk about plane crashes where people survive?
No, hold on. No. Sadly, this is not one of those stories. Bill Cannell had bought an airplane called a Curtiss Falcon. Now, to give you guys the 20-second background, the Navy needed a scout bomber trainer. All right? They wound up buying the SNJ-IE AT-6 from North American. But Curtiss had a competing product called the Falcon, which looked like a 3/4 scale AT-6. Okay? By the way, Curtiss had made several...
like a P-40, though?
No. It was a radial engine. In fact, if you remember,
the landing gears didn't ever retract like a P-40.
Oh yeah, they went sideways and came up. Yeah, that was kind of a Curtiss thing. That had its own advantages and disadvantages. But anyway, the airplane, and there are planes like the CER-24 and some others that actually did see some limited service, like in China. But anyway, the airplane was actually, I think, a little faster than a T-6, but it was smaller, it was twitchier. The Navy just thought it wasn't really the plane they wanted, so they lost the contract. They made like a dozen of them. Well, when the Navy didn't buy them, they just sold them off to whoever would take them. Well, Bill Cannell wound up getting one. Now, as I'm going to say 6-year-old, 5-year-old, I remember being sat in the cockpit of this thing, and Bill Cannell was in the cockpit, and he was touching stuff up with zinc chromate. And excuse me, cough medicine belch. I still remember the smell of that stuff. And I used to, when we go by the Tallahassee Commercial Airport, we kept it.
Was the engine smaller in the Falcon?
Well, it was a smaller radial engine, yeah. It was a radial, but it wasn't that big. It wasn't that big 600 horse they had in the T6. No, I'm sure it was smaller, but anyway, the Falcon had a glide ratio of a homesick manhole cover, and Cannell was trying to get the airplane certified through the FAA, and even back in the early '60s, the FAA was full of paperwork and they had they weren't certifying the airplane. Well, and in all fairness, what Bill did was a bad idea. Now, Cannell would run the airplane up, and run the engine and stuff and everything, and he was getting it all fixed up, trying to get it certified. And apparently, without proper inspection or paperwork, he decided, you know what, I'm just going to take the thing around the pattern one time. Well, the problem was that, and this is a big problem in the American South and Southeast, dirt daubers, they're a form of wasp that make these clay nests, and they look for any place they can put. We used to get them on our house all the time as kids. We go out and we clean the garage. We'd go out and knock them down with a broom. The things would come out to try to attack us. We'd run inside. Yeah, welcome to life in the 60s. Anyway, so they would also, my dad always, most airplanes you see have pitot tube covers on them to keep bugs from getting in there and plugging the tube. Our dad always used Coca-Cola cans, beer cans or soda cans to cover it. But anyway, apparently dirt daubers had gotten into the fuel vents and made nests. And when Cannell went to fly the airplane, he took off, everything was fine, the engine was putting out good power, positive rate, gear up, and he starts to fly about midfield downwind, the engine starts to sputter. What had happened was, it was a fuel vent that they had plugged, and as a result, as gas was burned, air could not get in to replace the volume as the gas came down. So it creates a suction, the fuel can't flow, despite the fuel pump, the engine chokes out and dies. He wound up crashing in the woods by the airport. That airplane came down like a stone, and people ran in, and there were people at the airport watching him fly because it was an interesting airplane. They all drove over there. They grabbed him. The plane was burning. They opened the cockpit. They got him out. They dragged him out, and he was alive when they got him out, but he died shortly thereafter, probably from internal injuries. And my dad was in the hospital, I think, recovering from a hernia operation when he heard it on the news.
Yeah, that's right.
It broke his heart because this was his closest friend. And I'd actually sat in that very airplane. God, this is so weird to think about.
And the same thing nearly killed me.
And then 30 years, 25 years later, the same thing almost kills my brother. And the dirt daubers had made a nest in the fuel vent of the Citabria, so the fuel couldn't get to the engine. Now, every time you open the tanks to refuel or something, it lets the pressure balance, so they'll run for a while. But unfortunately, Citabria is an aerobatic airplane. Now, most airplanes have vented fuel caps just in case that very thing happens. But since this is an aerobatic airplane designed to fly on its back, it did not have vented fuel caps, so there wouldn't be any leaks if you went inverted. And that's what lowered the fuel pressure, caused the engine to sputter. And to his credit, Blaine recognized the problem early and tried to turn back for the field, but it gave up the ghost before he could get turned around.
And it's like when we're kids, we would get a straw and put soda in it, put your finger over it,
pick up
and then release it to drop the soda out. It was the same physics. And the creepiest part of the whole thing was when I was in the hospital. And the very nice FAA investigator came in to talk to me. And he was going, yeah, okay, why don't you tell me what happened? And I was telling him what had happened. And I said, okay. And I said, well, yeah, this, blah, 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 and I said, he goes, what do you think caused the crash? And I said, well, it may have been an electrical failure because one of the magnetos was okay. The other one wasn't working that well. The other was okay, but it was dropping a little. And he said, no, it wasn't the electrical system. In fact, I had to shut the system off at the crash site. And I said, well, then I don't know what caused the crash. He goes, a dirt dauber had built a nest in your air vent. And I said, oh, really? He goes, yeah, and that's what started the engine for fuel. And he asked him what kind of pilot plane was, and I told him he was a good pilot, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy said, well, thanks for your information. Okay. He said, thank you for your information. He goes, it's nice to have somebody to talk to. Usually when I do this, I'm all alone.
Yeah. They made that comment after the miracle on the Hudson that you have no idea how happy we are to be able to interview the pilot because normally, it's CVR data.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you don't forget.
Okay, well, we need to cheer things up a little bit here.
Yeah.
There I was.
Well,
in the Congo.
If you guys remember that old commercial. Well, guys, Ken and Steve, stay on the phone. I'm gonna let everybody go. We're folks are signing off, and I don't blame them. It's
I'll sign off here. Good talking to you guys.
Well, Stephen, thanks for calling. And by the way, one quick question before you go. I know nobody watching this is going to understand the reference, but are you saying that by the way, guys, my younger brother's an attorney in Mississippi, and you're a defense attorney now for the public defender's office?
Yes.
Am I understand you make $48,000 a year less than a prosecutor?
Yes. Starting salary, yes.
That is that's how the heck does a prosecutor make twice what you're making?
As it was explained to me, quasi tongue in cheek, the only thing politicians like less than criminals is people that defend them.
Well, okay. Well, that's an honest answer. I appreciate that. Okay.
It has to do more with being a state employee versus I'm a county employee versus being a state employee.
Oh, well, the prosecutors are state employees?
They are, but public defenders are county employees. But there's things you get into politics about because the state has started funding certain employee positions for us, and all this kind of stuff. It's a complicated thing that goes back to about how Mississippi traditionally did public defenders. Like they usually basically pick private attorneys, just pay them an hourly rate to handle the criminal cases because they didn't have dedicated public defenders.
Okay.
Now they do, but they're county employees, and the counties don't have the money that the state has, and of course, the state don't have the money the feds have.
Mm-hmm.
But they're working on getting it straightened out. Now, hopefully, they will. But it's like did I tell you what my sister Patty responded? She goes, "Aren't you glad you're a district that with the DA's office?" And I responded, "I'm a public defender."
By the way, guys, Patty is the one I had to go rescue on the highway this afternoon.
What was up with that?
Their car broke down. Their Toyota, of all things, their minivan pooped. I think the alternator went. And
they got money, Max. Let them call Uber.
What? I couldn't do that because just the other night, Bob had been over here not only helping us adjust our TV multiple times, but he also had helped fix our ceiling fan where it no longer rattles. So I definitely owed him one.
But we have a joke here. Do you know why people become DAs instead of public defenders in Mississippi?
Why?
Because you don't know the power of the dark side.
Well, guys, I'm going to sign off now. I'm going to let everybody go. I want to thank the 62 people that are still watching. We had 139 at one point. Guys, it's really great. I hope you enjoyed the after show where we just sit around and I thought we'd be more energetic, but it really picked up after you called, Steven, so thanks. I appreciate that.
Good.
And give your wife our
you'll
best.
Get my bill.
Yeah.
That sounds like an attorney.
I'm going to let the intro run for a little while in case you guys want to chat amongst yourself for a few minutes. But it's time for me and my wife to go watch the very last Henry Cavill episode of The Witcher, which is way better than it has any right to be. Guys, take care of yourselves, and as always,
you too.
I'll let you guys say goodbye before I sign off. Ken?
Good night, y'all. It was great being here. Enjoy the after show.
Steven?
Ave Imperator, Mortate Salutant. We hereby to die, salute you.
How Spartan. Take care of yourself, guys, and as always, model on.